All right, good afternoon, everybody. I think we'll get started. It doesn't seem to be too many more people coming in. Again, I'd like to welcome everybody, and we'll get started with our first presentation. Is from Clarence Swanton. Clarence is going to give us an update on Linuron-free weed control in carrots and what are our options for 2022. Clarence, take it away.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks very much for attending today. It's excellent. So today I've been asked to go through some of the work we've been doing on developing a Linuron free weed management program for carrots. Linuron, we still have issues with Linuron. The most recent issue has been a supply issue. We have been under constant review in terms of registration, and then the ability of resistant weed species to develop in regards to Linuron. So we have a number of variables all at play at the same time that's really taking away from the opportunity to use Linuron as we have in the past. So, you know, Linuron is absolutely central. It's what I call a platform technology in carrots. And if we get resistance, then we truly do have a unique problem on our hands. And I want to stress that in terms of the resistant development, the issue of speed is surprising how fast these pigweeds have picked up these fairly high levels of resistance. So just so that everybody's on the same plate again, I just want to go through what we did to develop this strategy, just to be sure that everybody understands. So when we undertook this project, we were stuck. We had a problem because there were no new herbicides in carrots. And what were we going to do to replace Linuron? And the only way that we could handle that problem was to take a look at products that were registered for field crops and to determine what kind of dose would be required to control pigweed, and then find out whether or not that dose was selective on the carrots to protect them. So I just want to stress that. So I'm going to use the term biologically effective dose on some of the products we're going to talk about. So be very clear in your mind that it's not the commercial rate that we're using to do this, because that could lead to problems if you misuse these products. So anyway, we did a lot of screening to figure this out. We then took that to the field and tested in the field under various conditions and retested to be sure that we had selectivity and that we had the dose that would give us 90 to 100% control of pigweed only, okay? So that's important. And here you can see, for example, the pre-emergence treatments here, and you can see in the bottom here, this is Zidua here, its activity on pigweed. So we tested both pre-emergence herbicides and post-emergence herbicides, and we played with the rates to be sure that we were safe. And that was so important to get this done. So when we talk about products such as Goal, Blazer, and Zidua, in particular those three products, please note that we're using that biologically effective rate, which is the rate to control pigweed and pigweed only. And so, for example, with Goal, we are using 60 grams as opposed to 120, which is registered for onions. And Blazer, we're down to 18.7 grams versus it is higher than that, 400 grams used in soybeans. So, and the Zidua is at 89 grams, okay? So keep that in mind. The Sencor rate, whoops, the Sencor rate is the lowest rate on the herbicide label for Sencor. And so we get to the point where we have tested this enough to know that we've got good selectivity and that these types of products can be used safely on the carrots in order to control the pigweed. So I'm going to talk about the strategy. And I also want to stress that this work has been done primarily on high organic matter soils. And so be aware of that as well. So I'm going to share with you the program that we put together, okay? And that program, one second, I gotta lower that. I'll just go through a step-by-step here. The pre-treatments, we use Giesegard in our program. We did so at a rate of 2.83 liters per acre. Keep in mind, whenever you put a pre-emergence herbicide on, you need that rainfall for activation. If we get into cold springs, whatever you've used there could cause delay in germination or seedling emergence. And there's the issue of soil type, and this is why I stressed about the organic matter. This is down at Harrow on less than 2% organic matter. This is pyroxasulfone or residua applied pre on carrots. There it's applied post. This is dual on carrots pre and dual post. Striking the difference in the ability of carrots to survive. So, here's an example where if you put those on pre-emergence on low organic matter soils, your chances of success there are very minimum. So keep that in mind as well. We use Partner to control, as it used that as a stale seed bed approach. We use that at a rate of 429 mils per acre. And again, Partner, we have to be wary about Partner again. If we get some heavy rain shortly after application, it can reduce seedling emergence. It is effective only on very small pigweed. And there are some reports of resistant pigweed to bromoxynil. So I'll keep that in mind there. So our goal here, the ultimate goal, and this is what I consider to be perhaps one of the most delicate stages in the weed management program for carrots. Because it's a race against time. You've got the carrot trying to get to the surface. You've got this weed species coming at you and coming at you constantly. This is the ideal condition, the way you'd like to see the carrot bed in the early spring. When the carrots come up, all they can detect are the carrots next to them, and that weeds are under control. And that's just the ideal situation to do that. So how do we achieve that as we move forward? So we tried to look at what herbicides we could put on very early in the stage of the carrot growth. And here, these are treatments that I'm comfortable recommending for to be applied. Basically, the bunny ear stage, which is the cotyledon stage, up to 1 leaf stage. And here, so we can put Zidua on at a rate of 71 mils per acre, Prowl at a rate of 1.5 liters per acre, and Dual at a rate of 480 mils per acre. So that can go on, and those will provide you with pigweed control, and they'll also provide you with a limited residual time frame at which they would be available to control the weeds as well. The one here, Blazer. Blazer can be used at this early stage at this rate of 31 mils per acre. And so you wanted it to, right now, we've been recommending just, if you apply Blazer, just apply it by itself. We're not sure about all the tank mixes yet, but certainly Blazer does have that option to be able to go in. And again, I want to stress that Blazer will only take out the pigweed that's there, okay? The Zidua, the Prowl, and the Dual, you'll have basically the full spectrum of weed control offered by those products for a short residual period of time. This is Blazer on pigweed. If the pigweed gets too big, this treatment's not going to work. It's just going to burn the pigweed, and those pigweeds will survive and continue on with growth. At the 2 to 3 leaf stage, we use Blazer again as a single treatment. We could also use Sencor, and then we tank mixed here at the 2 to 3 leaf stage. Now, early at the cotyledon stage, I was a little hesitant to start mixing too many things there because of the delicate nature of the cotyledon. As it grew and got a little hardier at the 2 to 3 leaf stage, we could mix Blazer with Zidua, Blazer with Dual, and also Blazer with Sencor. So again, in those combinations, products such as Zidua and Dual will not control emerged pigweed. And so you put the Blazer in there to take out the emerged pigweed. And so it just beefs up the post-emergence activity there, and Dual will look after the residual part of that activity. And later in the 3 to 6 leaf stage, again, residual, dual, Goal. We bring Goal into the picture here at 100 mils per acre. Goal is harsher on carrots than is Blazer. So that's why we have Blazer at the early stages of the carrot. But as we move forward, Goal can be used very effectively to take out the pigweed. And again, that Goal at 100 mils is going to take out primarily the pigweed that you have. And you can start to tank mix with those products as well at this stage. So if you put it all together, this is what it might look like as a program. So we start out with Giesegard pre. We use Partner for the still seedbed. Zidua was applied at the bunny ear stage. Blazer was applied at the the bunny ear to one leaf stage. Again, so we kept the treatment separate there. Blazer and Sencor in this recommendation was used, applied at the 1 to 3 leaf, and then we mixed Goal and Sencor. Also in this last stage here, the post 3 to 6 leaf, we could also tank mix Goal and Zidua and Goal and Dual, which would give us some residual later in the season. And it's particularly, we try to keep the weeds clear because we can use canopy fill of the carrots to help us control the weeds as well. Here's an example where we use Giesegard, pre-Partner, still seedbed. In this case, we put Prowl on the bunny ear stage. We followed that up with Blazer on the bunny ear stage. And then in this case, we mixed Blazer with Linuron to get the pigweed. That's provided we have Linuron available to us. And then a second shot of Zidua, a shot of Zidua, and then Goal and Linuron. And we were able to get good stands and good yields from those types of treatments. And the same thing here. This is again Giesegard or Moxonil, Zidua applied at the bunny ear stage, followed by Blazer, and then Blazer and Linuron and Goal. So the combinations, there are tons of different types of combinations you can put there to make this work. So you can see that the selectivity is good and that the stand is good. And in these trials, the yields were not significantly different. The other point I want to mention, the other problem that we face in carrot and onion production, particularly in the marsh, is that we really have a very limited rotation. I'm not sure we even call it rotation because it's carrots and onions and carrots and onions. And so that puts a lot of pressure on the chemistry. Okay? Probably the best resistant management tool that we have would be to use some of the group 15 herbicides such as Dual, which is metolachlor, or pyroxasulfone, which is Zidua, as these products have very limited resistance development at a global level. There's wild oat resistance in Ontario that's present, but that's not an issue for us. Globally, there are 7 resistant wheat species, one of which is Palmer amaranth and tall water hemp, which is in the pigweed family. But so far, we've been fortunate not to have this happen in Ontario. So this is important. What I'm getting at here, this is important to have these products into your program as we move forward. Now, I want to get into a new product that we've been working with for the last few years. What I've shown you up to this point is what we've done to control the pigweed with biologically effective rates and tank mixing that with other products that we could use effectively in carrots. In 2019, we learned about pyridate, which I believe is registered in England on carrots. And so we've started to take a look at this product, and this is called Tough 5 EC. It's an inhibitor of photosynthesis. It's a group 6 herbicide, which puts it in the same family as with Partner. And it is effective for the control of Linuron resistant pigweed species, chickweed species, Galansoga, lamb's quarters, and nightshades. We first tested this in 2019. We got the product late in the season, and in 2019, we just screened it across several doses across the carrots just to see if we could pick up any injury. At that time, it looked fairly safe. In 2020, we tested it more thoroughly, We tested 2 formulations. The company was looking at different formulations of what to use, different doses. And these doses range from 300 to 900 grams active. And we applied the product at the bunny ear stage, the 2 to 3 leaf stage, and the 5 to 7th leaf stage. So to summarize from 2020, we did not get any injury with either formulation applied post. And quite remarkably, we did not injure the bunny ear stage, which really surprised me. That was a kind of eye-popping moment for me. And so we applied it alone and in tank mix, and we tank mixed it with pyroxasulfone. We tank mixed it metolachlor, which is dual, or pendimethalin. And we did not get any crop injury, even in that tank mixture when applied at the bunny ear stage. And the carrot yields did not differ. And so quite remarkably, it seemed to have a lot of flexibility, both in timing and in dose that we could use. So then I started to think about it, and wondering whether or not that this product, could it be a replacement for Linuron, or could it be a product that would help reduce our reliance on Linuron as well? So in 21, we changed our approach a little bit. We continued to look for the tolerance of the crop, especially around these early stages of at the bunny ear stage, 2 to 3 leaf, 5 to 7 leaf. We used rates from 300 to 600 grams active. And then we also looked at it as a stale seed bed technique. We wanted to know whether we could apply this as a stale seed bed treatment and still protect our seedlings, the carrot seedlings. So I'm just going to show you some of the treatments that we did, okay? And so these are not all the treatments by any means, but I just want to show you, I've just selected some to give you an idea of the range. So here in the first column here, you'll see that we have the treatments. We have pyridate. So the check is standard herbicides only. And the pyridate, we used pyridate at 600 grams active applied to the bunny ear stage, and then applied it at 2 other times, 2 to 3 leaf stage, and at the 5 to 7 leaf stage, we applied 300 grams. We used a different formulation, and we used it at 600 grams at the bunny ear stage, 450 grams, and 450 grams again at these 2 different stages. And then here we use pyridate at 600. We tried it as a stale seed bed, and then applied pyridate twice, bunny ear into the 2 to 3 leaf stage. Again, keep in mind, we're looking at this strictly from a tolerance standpoint. How much does it take? How much flexibility do we have in doses and timings? And these are the yields in tons per hectare. And there is no significant difference in those yields, despite using if you total those numbers up, like 600, 900, 1200, total of 1200 grams of pyridate was applied to those carrots, and we did not see any impact on yield or injury. Now, we have pursued a minor crop registration with this product, and the rate range, as I recall, that they'll be suggesting is the 300 grams active to 450 grams active. And so this is the rate range that will be issued at, and it'll be one timing of the 2 to 3 leaf stage. And that's really, we did that to be sure that we were safe with this product, because the last thing we want to have is this product come on and some injury develop that I haven't seen yet, or just would not expect in the work that we've done. So last year in 21, we looked at the 300 and 300 and 300 at these different stages, 450, 450, and 450. And again, we did not see any significant difference in marketable yield from that. So we're hoping to get this product into the market so that you can use it under an emergency use management program, and using it from the rate of 300 to 450 should provide us with some good flexibility to help us control Linuron resistant species. We also did a quick look last year to see if we could use it as a stale seed bed technique to to control the weeds there. And again, this was all about crop tolerance. So in this study, we kept the weeds out of there, but here we applied it. We again had two different formulations. One formulation was applied at 600 to 1200, the second one at 900, all the way up to 1800 grams active. And I want to stress, which is quite remarkable, that at such a range of product, we did not see any difference in the carrot seedling stand at the time we did the count. So the goal here is to have your seed beds looking like this early in the spring. Carrots only detecting other carrots. But we well know that on any given spring, your carrots are going to look like this. And so what do you do when the weeds are taken off? And we are pursuing this further, but this is pyridate at a high rate. I still need to verify these rates, but this was the very highest rate we used in this study. And you can see how effective it was, and the carrot seedlings were all there. So quite remarkable. So we need to confirm this, though. We have to do further work on this to get the rates and the timing, because clearly as the rates increase, the speed of kill will also increase. And so in these other beds there, you don't see as effective a control at this time. So we also, over the last 2 years, we have mixed pyridate with Linuron effectively, pyridate post. We've mixed it with peroxysulfone. We've mixed it with dual. We've mixed it with pendimethalin, and been very successful with good crop tolerance in any of those combinations that we've used. So if you put that together, there's a possibility that we would do something like this. Again, Geese Garden as our pre-emergence treatment. Stale seed bed would be partner. We put some peroxysulfone down on the bunny ear stage, followed up with Blazer. Then at the 1 to 3 leaf stage, we could use pyridate 1 to 3 leaf and pyridate post at 3 to 6 leaf. Now, keep in mind this emergency use permit is for one application only. And that's so what I'm pointing out here is you could use it at the 1 to 3 leaf stage, or you could use it at a 3 to 6 leaf stage, and be comfortable that you're going to get reasonably good weed control. So pretty pumped about this product and its opportunity for carrot growers. So basically 2 years of intensive study. We did start it in 2019, but that was a very preliminary bit of work. It has demonstrated excellent crop safety at all rates and growth stages. And so it does look like it may be potentially a new herbicide that could replace or reduce the role of Linuron for weed management in carrots. Now, if all else fails, if the pigweeds do escape, and invariably there will be some, keep in mind that growing carrots in the marsh puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the chemistry to work well and to control the weeds. And invariably, in any given season, there will be escapes in the system. So when all else fails, basically we have to keep manual weed control as part of that picture. That's still going to be a useful technique, but hopefully much more reduced, much less labor than what you see in this picture here. And also the use of the wick applicator. And I want to stress that this is a very important tool. This is a commercial field up near Thamesford. And the grower had such an infestation of Linuron resistant pigweed here that he was prepared to walk away from that field because he felt he had nothing he could do to control the weeds. So he was going to walk away and not harvest this field. We talked to him about testing the wick applicator. He put the wick applicator on his tractor. He harvested that field and was grateful for that tool. So basically we saved that field for him. So it can be a very, very useful tool to have as a backup for those escaped pigweed species. And it can be very effective. In dense stands like this, for example, this is on the right-hand side of this. We went twice, both up and back to get the control as the weed species density increases. Sometimes it takes more than one pass over the field to get the job done properly. But at this point, what you're doing, whether it's that manual weed control or it's the use of the wick applicator, you're really trying to enhance your ability to harvest that field, because the yield losses occurred. There's nothing else you can do about that. But now it's the question of harvestability. Can I improve the harvestability of that field by using a wick applicator? So well worth it. It's certainly worth having that tool available to you. With that, I want to thank some people who have all played important roles in this. Tessa DeBoer, Dennis Van Dyke, Peter Smith, Kevin Vander Kooi, Shawn Janse, and Kristen Obeid. And a huge thank you, big shout out to the Bradford Co-op and their growers, to MAFRA, and all the staff at the research station, and to the University as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clarence. We have one question in the chat. I'll just relay it. Someone asked, is anyone in the United States pursuing a registration on this product or on the use of pyridate in carrots that you know of?
Kristen, you might chip in here if you know of anything as well. The goal here is that these products get put forward through the IR4 program in the United States. I'm not exactly sure where pyridate is on the IR4 program, but I would think that the company has expressed interest in pursuing registration for this product in Canada, and I would suggest that that likely means they would be developing it on a North American basis. They would have a strategy for all of North America as well.
Josh, I see you have your hand up. Do you want to maybe comment on that? You might have a better idea.
Yeah, if you don't mind, if I jump in here, Clarence. So just a couple updates from the minor use front. The emergency use submission for pyridate was submitted a little bit over a week ago, so we're hopeful to have an answer on that by the end of April or early May. So good news for the carrot growers. We do expect it to be hopefully supported. It had near national participation from each province. As Clarence said, the application will be at the 2 to 7 leaf stage at that kind of mid-range at 300 to, I believe, 450 grams of active ingredient per hectare. In terms of a full registration, what happened this year is parsnips was actually selected as a regional priority at the recent priority setting workshop. What the plan is to have tolerance data run on the parsnips themselves, but we'll indicate for PMC to run residue data on carrots. And what we'll then do is hopefully select a future project likely next year on radish for tolerance and for residue data. And then we'll combine Clarence's data with carrots for the tolerance and efficacy to go for a subgroup 1B registration in the future. So we are pursuing Canadian registration that's in the works. It just doesn't necessarily say carrots right now, but we do expect that this parsnip project selected this year should support a future carrot use in Canada. And
is any update on, do you know what is happening in the United States on pyridate? Have you heard anything, or is it not on their radar?
I haven't had any direct discussions with Belgium quite yet regarding United States uses. They are definitely supportive of the use here in Canada, and they're looking at more applications for horticultural crops in North America now that they've reintroduced another pyridate product in. So I do expect that their American side will also be supportive of this, but we'll have to look into that some more over the next couple months. But I don't have a direct answer, but I do expect it's likely on the way.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions. So we'll move on to.
I was just going to comment that Dan is probably asking because of the export issues, and they need to have MRL intolerances to export carrots to the. Right, Dan?
That's right, Kristen, thanks. Most of the concern from our end, obviously, is exportability. Rough number, probably 50% of the processed carrots in the Eastern Canada market are exported. So this could potentially turn into a bit of a traceability nightmare for the processing growers in the mineral soils, but we'll cross that bridge. We always do.
The good news is that more Linuron has made it to Canada than we originally expected, pardon me. I believe the latest numbers that we heard was about 60%. So the growers might want to keep an eye out to try and secure that, but we're hoping that this registration will take some of the burden off of those supplies of Lorax.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on just in the interest of time. We'll have Kristen Obeid and Chuck Baresich and Grant Elgie from Haggerty Creek, and we'll listen to their presentation on ag robotics and what's happening in the marsh this summer. Kristen?
Actually, Chuck's going to share his screen.
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Perfect.
Yep.
All right, see if this technology is going to work. How's that look?
It's coming. There we go. Perfect.
All right. So Kristen and I are going to tag team this a little bit. So we'll go through kind of what's happening this summer and what's been going on. And so I'll kind of take this through a little bit about myself. Haggerty Creek, we're down here in the Southwest. And we are learning lots about production areas in other parts of Ontario. So relying heavily on folks like Kristen and other members of the group to learn about how things work. And we got involved in robotics a couple of years ago, and the idea of where we're going is weed control is really where is one of the low-hanging fruit of the robotics industry. Like obviously ag robotics and precision ag is a huge space. It can mean lots of things to lots of people. And what weed control is probably what's been identified as one of the first places to go. And so for going forward, we're going to expand on what we did last year. So for those of you who've seen it or who don't know, in 2021, we brought in a couple of autonomous weeding robots from France, and we used these in very small focused trials. And the idea of this was to figure out the logistics, do the logistics work, does the light cultivation work, and what kind of success could we have. And we wanted to do this on a small scale, just to determine, answer some questions that we had. The other question that we had was, are the RTK signals sufficient? Can we mark AB lines? Can we track the fields to see if we can follow the rows? And we were very pleasantly surprised at how well the robots functioned following the rows. There's always challenges with an RTK signal. And we also tried some cases where we mapped the fields with the receiver that you see here. We mounted it right onto the planter and then took that receiver and mounted it onto the robot. And the reason why we wanted to do this with the Oz is the procedure is exactly the same once we move to the larger robots. So whatever we were doing with a small robot, we can do with the large robot. And if it works in one, it should work in the other. So we were pleasantly surprised at how well that worked. And then we did some measurement and some trials of the various tools, trying to see how they worked, and how effective they were in the weed control spectrum. And some tools were better than the others. I think that's not a big surprise. The harrows worked quite well. Some tools did not break up the soil sufficiently. There was a lot of rain last year and a lot of compaction, and that definitely had an impact. So some tools work better than others. But also, if in our trials last year, we were not bringing the robots back to the same field once a week in some cases. And so that is where we had a bigger problem with the tools not working effectively. In the situations where the robot came back to the same field on a more regular schedule, we had less of a challenge with the tooling. The other thing that we discovered was that, different farmers have, I guess, different amounts of crop residue, and that does affect how well the cultivation robots are functioning. And that is something that we're going to have to get our head around going forward. I'm not sure whether this video will come through. It'll probably a little bit choppy. The idea of the robots working and doing their task, I think we were pretty happy with how they performed. In general, the robots, if they told us that the batteries would last 7 or 8 hours, they would last 7 or 8 hours. We had the, that ability. The communication software and the other connectivity, those issues, they weren't issues. They tended to work. So we were pleasantly surprised at the results. And I think overall, we're pretty happy with how the weed control worked. It does require multiple passes, and this is something that I guess is a bit of a change or whatever. But when I say multiple passes, it's going to be regular. So again, small weeds, keeping the weeds small is the most effective. And being creative on the tooling choices is also an important thing that we learned. So not all the tools that came with the Oz worked with Ontario conditions. And then we had to make modifications to some of the tools to get them to work correctly. And I'm not sure how well this shows up on the bottom right over here, but here's an example of the tools getting plugged with crop residue from the previous year. And this tool that they sent, we found was completely useless. And then we also made some modifications and used some different hoeing tools depending on the soil type. So the muck soil, the high organic matter soils tended to be a bit more forgiving. Some of the mineral soils, we found we had to be more creative in what we used. And then on this slide, this was in one of our trials that we did. And there's a few things that this slide shows. The first thing was that if you look at this little curve up here, when the map was created, these curves were in the map. So when you reload the map, the robot follows whatever errors you made in your map precisely every single time. So we thought that was something to learn. We actually had better results most of the time using a full RTK signal than we did mapping with the planter unit. And over here, this is what we started with. And I think the presentation from Clarence ahead of time showed lots of pictures of, a full weed bank. And then this was after one pass. So after one pass, about 75% of the weeds were removed. After 2 passes, we had about 98% removed. And really, in this case, this is what we were after is something around that, 90% plus efficacy. And then those weeds, they shriveled up and died afterwards because they were removed from the soil. Again, if you notice, these weeds are small. Anything that was, once the weeds got to above 2 inches in height, 3 inches in height, the issue is that the roots are large enough that the light cultivation does not dig them out. And so it's all about the size of the root, which I don't think that surprises anybody. And then I guess going forward, we were asked lots of questions about the size of the robot and how many acres can the robot handle, and we did have the small ones. So what we were trying out last year was what I call a micro scale robot. So this is a robot that is designed for around 2 acres a day. And there's lots of different robots that fit into this category. And then there's a medium-sized robot. And these are robots that are designed for about 20 acres a day. And then we have the large-scale robots. So in the horticulture space, there's not a lot of room for the large-scale robots at this point. But robots like these is where the fit will be. especially because we can swarm some of these robots together. You know, so if the capacity is not sufficient for an operation, they can be swarmed and put together to get sufficient acres done. And I think one of the things that we learned about the robots is just to stop talking about how big a field can the robot look after versus, how many days in a cycle does it take? So, if a robot can weed a field over a 5-day cycle or a 6-day cycle, I think that's more the terminology that we're starting to use to determine the capacity of the machine. Can it actually weed that field in the time frame that is required? And so, that's why you're not really seeing a lot of these bigger robots out there. And then moving forward into 2022, we are continuing our work. And I think what we're doing a little differently in 2022 is we are deploying some robots on a commercial scale to more designated locations. So the Oz robots, they are going to be staying around tree nurseries, berry crops, and small market gardens. The 2 Oz robots that you may have seen last year have both been sold to customers. And we have 4 new ones. They should arrive around the 1st of May. And their placement is going to be on the small, 10-acre farm, 10-acre sites, nurseries, berries, those types of things. So some will be around London, Tilbury, the Simcoe area. They'll be kind of scattered across the province. We were very happy with how these robots worked. And then the dyno that we have, kind of the difference with the dyno, for those of you who didn't get a chance to see it, is that it has about 5 times the capacity. So it runs 4 kilometers an hour, and it can run, an 8 to 10 hour charge. So it's the kind of the idea of this robot is that if you place it in a 50-acre field, you should be able to weed that field over a 5-day window. Excuse me. And so that leaves 2 days for error and stuff not happening, and rain events, these types of things. We don't know for sure if the fields have to be cultivated once a week. We don't. That is one of our funding projects for this year, is to measure how often do we actually have to cultivate that field to have effective weed control. And the way that our trial is being set up is that there will be a pre-emergent setup rate of a herbicide in the field, and then the robot will take over from there. And we will try to determine whether it's either every 7 days, 10 days, 14 days, those types of things. We are going to try that to try to determine how often. Obviously, rainfall is going to play an effect of this. If it's wet and humid and the weeds like to grow, then that might have to be tightened up. But we're trying to get some guidelines as to what that is, because we don't actually know at this point. One of the differences with the dyno robot over the Oz is that it uses RTK. So if you notice, it has the exact same receiver that the Oz has on it. So it uses RTK to drive down the rows, but it has a camera located on the tool carrier. And then so when it sees a green row, the tool carrier will shift left and right to keep the cultivators onto the row. So we do have we can get closer to the row. And with the finger tine weeders on there, we should be able to get pretty good results. Should be able to get pretty good results in between the plants. And so we've done a bunch of, I guess, running the robot around. And so this dyno robot is coming to the Holland Marsh area, and that's where it's going to spend its summer, on 2 different sites around the Holland Marsh. And then moving on, NIO is replacing the dyno robot with this version. This is called an Oreo. And the difference with the Oreo over the dyno is you can see in the middle that it has higher clearance. And the idea of the higher clearance and this lifting arm is that it can carry a seeding unit. So you'll be able to seed with this robot as well as cultivate. And then they're also putting band sprayers and things on the back. So this robot can carry more weight. It runs a little bit faster, and it also has a swappable battery pack. So the dyno robot, you can't take the batteries out to recharge them. You have to bring the robot to a shed to recharge. This robot has a swappable battery in the back that can be pulled out and a new battery put in if you needed to run longer time frame. So the Oreo is coming around should be here about the 25th of June, 1st of July, depending on containers and these types of things. So we will be trading out the dyno for this robot at that time. And this is going to be the North American model. You know, we're kind of thinking that it'll be that 60 to 70 acre field size is kind of what it's designed for. And then, not that this is related to ours, but we do have a TED robot coming, so I'll just skip over the TED. But what I want to talk about is we are doing some work with sensors with the robots. So we will be mounting a field analyzer onto the robot for when it's going across the crop. And what this sensor does is it collects imagery and plant health factors as it's going across the field, looking at the crop. It will also be taking pictures of the crop, and that's what all these orange triangles are. So we'll be taking pictures of the crop as it is weeding it. And then it also will automatically take pictures of anomalies. And so we can set up parameters that say, at what level do I consider this an anomaly? And then the user of the robot has access to an online portal, and they can log in and they can see images of their crop and what it looks like and what the at different parts of the field, as well as whatever those anomalies might be. And every one of these anomalies is geo-referenced. So they come with a geolocation point. So if you see something that you wanted to go look at, you can actually navigate yourself back to that spot. And the reason why we're doing this on the robot is that if the farmers, have robots in the field and they are not out cultivating those fields or walking through them, this gives them a set of eyes to go back and see, see what's going on and document it. We're also doing some other work eventually with the UVC lighting for disease control, which I won't spend a lot of time on that here, but there's several projects happening at the same time. And then also in 2022, the Nexus robot that showed up at the demonstration day last July, we have 2 of those robots. So we are representing the Nexus robot for Ontario, and we have 2 of them. One is going to be placed close to us here at Grand Bend. The other robot is going to be shared between a local farmer and the Muck research station. And we're trying to keep these robots into carrots for 2022. The focus of them is going to be to increase their speed. So for those of you who haven't seen them, the idea of this robot is to, again, put it into a field that has had a pre-emergent herbicide application. When the initial flush of weeds has browned off to some degree, so maybe 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, that kind of thing, then this robot is deployed to pull out everything that is not a weed. So it has a set of cameras on it, and those cameras will look at the weed or look at the crop and determine, what is a carrot and what is not, and it will manually pull out the invader, I guess. So the reason why we're excited about this machine and the reason why we're willing to invest a lot of time on it is that it does not require high cultivation. So it doesn't require constant disturbing of the soil surface because it's only pulling out what is a weed. The downside of this robot is that it is very, very slow and it's very, very expensive. So I think we are going to spend 2022 figuring out what is the appropriate use case. It's hard to beat a cultivator. It's hard to beat a robot that can run, 5 miles, 4 miles an hour through the field. They're very, very simple machines. They're easy to look after. And so it's hard to beat that cultivation piece. But the precision of a robot like this and the lack of disturbance is very, very exciting. And then we have a farm droid robot. It actually just showed up yesterday. Grant Elgie just put it together. And this robot is a little bit unique in that it has a solar panel on the roof. So it is completely solar powered. You don't have to charge it. This robot is also unique in that it plants a crop and then weeds that same crop. So what it does when it is running is it plants all the seeds in a perfect grid pattern. So it knows where every plant is placed. So it records every one. And then as soon as that crop is planted, you will send it back through and it will start to weed that crop automatically. So because it knows where each one is, what you set is the tool depth, and then you set how close to the plant you want it to weed. So we're very excited about this robot. It's very well built, and the fact that it solves a logistical challenge of not having to charge it is a major plus. Again, we are uncertain how it is going to work in our environment, in our cropping conditions, but we will keep the group posted. I'm just getting near the end here. We also have a Roboti on its way here. So the Roboti is a little bit of a different robot. Essentially what it is it has a small diesel engine and a 3-point hitch. So the advantage to the Roboti is that you can clip on any existing 4-row implement. So 4 by 30-inch row implement that you already have will clip on in the middle of the Roboti. And it is a very simple robot designed to run, I think, 60 hours on a tank of fuel, depending on how much fuel you put in the tank. And it runs at a much higher ground speed, around 8 miles an hour. So it can cover quite a few acres. So we're quite interested in this robot. We do not have it placed yet. We've been talking with several growers about where we could use it and whatever. So if anybody has an idea or some interest, we are open to suggestions on this machine. And that is the end of my part of the presentation. Kristen, do you want to take over, or?
Well, could you advance to the next slide then?
I can, yep.
There's just 5 left. Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for attending today. So basically you saw the robots, pretty exciting stuff really, starting out with the small Oz robots. What actually happened like last March, Haggerty Creek Group, Chuck and Grant contacted OMAFRA and said, hey, can you help us set up some on-farm demonstrations with these weeding robots? So I said, of course, absolutely. And so I made a lot of calls and said, hey, let's figure out who all wants to participate. And we set up those demonstrations. And from there, it kind of like everything just kept going. And there's so much interest in what we were doing that a working group was established, which we meet every Friday at 9 a.m. And any growers or anyone else who's interested, more than welcome to participate. But as you can see from this table, basically these are all the people that are currently participating. We have grower organizations, we have individual growers, we have industry, we have both federal and provincial government, we have a few universities, and as well as a number of companies that participate. So this working group really has been established to, set some priorities and actually develop priorities for Ontario agriculture. And the companies that are participating in this working group, they're really finding that they're very interested in what's happening in Ontario. They think, wow, we didn't realize Ontario has such diverse cropping systems. And they really were happy with what was happening last year. And it's sort of, sure, they benefit by participating in the working group, but that's what the whole point is to bring, bring some of these companies together with academia, with the grower organizations to help solve problems that we're experiencing in Ontario agriculture. Next slide, please. So you saw a little bit about what happened last year with the 2021 demonstrations. That's in the first column there. But in 2022, there's a number of things that are planned in terms of the various robotics. For the vegetable side of things, there will be the farm droid that Chuck just showed you, and sugar beets. Now, people are like, why sugar beets? Well, the farm droid was actually made to solve weed challenges in organic sugar beets in Europe. So that was the crop it was first established on. And in onions, because they have some success in Europe. So those are the two crops we'll be testing in this year. Chuck already talked about the Dino and the Oreo, and so those will be up in the Marsh. There's also going to be a project at University of Guelph Ridgetown campus where Darren Robinson will be looking at the integration of herbicides, cover crops, and robotic weeders into vegetable production systems. We have also submitted numerous proposals for the next policy framework, or you may know that as the horticulture clusters, in a variety of crops and with different robotic systems as well. So you can see there is one harvester for asparagus from a company called Money Machines. So we're pretty excited about what we've accomplished with this ag robotics working group in just 1 year. And it's really doing what it was intended to do, is to bring the people who have an interest in these technologies together. And we really hope that we can start presenting what the problems are so that these companies actually make solutions for Ontario agriculture, and we don't have to sort of adapt their robotics for our conditions. We want to become a preferred collaborator for these companies. Next slide, please. And so that's sort of what we've presented actually to OMAFRA management, to say, we really want to become this preferred collaborator for these companies in Ontario and Canada. We want them to come here first and develop solutions for our problems. And so we've been challenged by our management to come back to them with a 5 to 10 year plan on what basically an ag robotics hub could look like in Ontario. And our main proposal for this robotics hub would be, it's a collaboration intended to leverage the synergies between Ontario's post-secondary institutions, ag robotics companies, local and abroad, agribusiness service providers, producer organizations, and government agencies. The hub, we want it to facilitate the identification, prioritization, development, and deployment of autonomic robotic solutions that will increase the productivity and stability of Ontario's horticulture sector. The resulting collaborative partnerships will also create Ontario investment and employment opportunities that will increase the province's competitive advantage. So we have a subcommittee working hard on this strategic plan in hopes to present this to our management to see where we can take this to make it a more formal group. So when people are looking to Ontario or even Canada, they know where to go, if they have a technology or they have an idea, for example, so that we can direct them and we can help make the connections to really solve our problems. Next slide, please. And so the second subcommittee under the ag robotics, or formal subcommittee under the ag robotics working group, is our economics one. And I have talked with a few growers about helping us out here. And this economic subcommittee is, we really want to standardize proven tools to map and measure horticultural production processes. We want to standardize methods for cost-benefit analysis to justify the use of robotics. And we want to conduct case studies for a number of horticultural crops. Well, obviously, we're going to be conducting case studies where we are doing some of these projects with the various robots. So we would want producers that grow carrots, onions, celery, grapes, tender fruit, and strawberries to, help us out to get this cost benefit analysis regarding robotics or automation in those crops. There are other subcommittees that are going on within this working group. We kind of call these ad hoc committees because they're not really formalized, but whenever an opportunity for funding comes up, anybody participating in the working group that has an interest kind of works together on putting together that application. And there's also been some questions regarding, some of the things we also need to think about around liability issues associated with autonomous field robots. So that's something that's in the works as well. So there's a lot of activity happening. There's a lot of excitement around this. And I encourage you to participate in what's happening with ag robotics. Everybody is welcome. And just so those on the call know, there will be a special meeting this Friday at 11 a.m. with Carbon Robotics with the basically that robot electrocutes weeds. So we have had them on before, but this will be a shorter presentation and we'll leave a lot of time for questions because there seems to be a lot of interest there. And with that, I thank you for your attention. I look forward to hearing back from some of you about participating in our future work, because it is exciting and just continues to gain momentum. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kristen and Chuck. I see Avia Eek has her hand up. Avia, go ahead and ask your question.
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Avia.
There we go. There we go. That's the catchphrase for this last little while. Like, you're on mute, unmute. We hear a lot about innovation, and especially in the agricultural committees that I sit on. So this is really, truly exciting innovation. I just have two questions and a couple of comments. So I noticed with the Oz, it's a really cute little compact machine. It doesn't look like it's adjustable to fit our rows. So that's one of my questions. When compared to the Dino, which looks like it has more adjustable settings for where your plants are, because our rows aren't this wide. Our rows are, 18 to 20 inches or whatever the center rows are. So is that little one adjustable, or do you need to go to a bigger model like the Oreo, which is going to be replacing the Dino, which would be better for the spacing of our rows?
I think you've already figured it out.
Yeah.
The Oz is designed for, I think the narrowest row that it can work in is about 22 inches safely. It only measures 18 inches wide, but there's too much. You can't, it just isn't that precise to go down like a 19-inch row, that kind of thing. Yeah. So then you're into something like a Dino, or the proper pronunciation is Dino, but I call it a Dino, so don't hold it against me, please. But like the Dino and the Oreo is what we're looking at for the narrower rows. It's about the only option that we have at this point.
Okay, so then my next question is cost, because I was talking to Kristen last week through Twitter. Nice to see you. And we were talking about some stuff, and then I was mentioning to my husband, like, on top of our regular workers, we easily put out $40,000 to $50,000 a year on additional labor. So looking at the rate of return on the investment, that's a thing. And then the battery cost. Like, what is the battery cost? And yeah.
So in terms of general cost, the math that I work out, like on a, let's say a robot like the Oreo that's going to be in that $250,000 to $300,000 range. The batteries that are in that robot have a theoretical lifespan of about 10 years. And the other components of the robot are, because there's no engine and no transmissions, what they're built with is like small electric motors, motor controllers, these types of things. And while on a whole it's expensive, any individual component that you may have to replace is fairly inexpensive. So the actual maintenance cost should be very reasonable. We're kind of thinking that on a rental basis for a robot like the Dino or the Oreo, we're kind of thinking that the annual cost is going to be somewhere, is it going to be 40,000 a year? Is it going to be 60,000 a year? We don't really know yet, but that's what we're spending 2022 trying to figure out is what do we need as a company to stay in business, and what can the farmer justify?
Right.
And in terms of a cost per acre. And I think one of the things that we're toying around with, and we're trying, and I sort of danced around the edges of it, is how many acres a day, or sorry, how many days is that robot committed on one farm? And can it be washed off effectively and moved to a different field safely, next to the next door neighbor? Because sometimes these robots will have excess capacity, like more than what somebody actually needs. Or if we have, if we provide 2 or 3 of them, and we can get through the fields a little bit faster, that's kind of where we're going with this, to bring that cost per acre, to at a bare minimum equivalent to what you're doing now, and in a really hopeful world, maybe somewhat less.
But I think Avia would also really benefit from the Nexus robot.
Yeah, so I'm very excited for these conversations to continue, and please keep me in the loop, because we are very interested. And then just as a comment, I noticed you had, and I did not write the name of the robot down for vineyards, and Kristen probably knows this, but if you wanted to try something, you might want to try talking to our Holland Marsh wineries guy, because we do have a winery here in the Holland Marsh, and we could just get all these robots here doing all kinds of things. So that would be exciting. So yeah, thank you both for the presentation. Really informative. As you said, Kristen, super exciting. Thank you.
You're welcome. We actually have 2 of the largest wineries already in Niagara we'll be working at. So yeah, this summer, and also for those of you who, we're going to be setting up demonstrations throughout the year, and we will make sure that we advertise them so everybody can have an opportunity to come and see them in the field working. There is a question there in the chat. Yeah,
in the chat, Chuck, someone was interested, said they'd be interested in the robots in their fields, especially to analyze the cost benefit analysis.
Sure.
And they could also use the robot, the Oz or the Roboti in celery this year, and then asked how we could get a hold of you. So
I will put my email address into the chat.
All right. So
we are looking, and again, this is a discovery process for everyone. So
yeah, we're all learning together. And that's also what's exciting. And yeah, anybody who wants to participate in the working group, please email me and I'll add you to the list. If you can make the meeting, you can make the meeting. I typically send out an agenda the Thursday before the meeting. So it just updates your appointment in your calendar so you know what we're talking about. There may be times when you're not interested in what we're talking about or what presenters we're having. So yeah, please contact us. The more the merrier, I guess, because this is how we've been making connections. We've been making the connections to get all this stuff. And we're so fortunate to have Haggerty Creek, who's so interested in the technology.
Well, and I think one piece that one piece that Kristen touched on a little bit in her presentation that I kind of glossed over was that we are going to continue our work with the soil testing and with specifically with measuring organic matter and depth. So that process is ongoing. The other piece that we're working on is we did get we have got 3 research permits through the PMRA for a drone application of fungicide, and we are doing trials of that, both from a efficacy standpoint, but also from a logistics standpoint to see if it even makes sense. And so that I think that might be of interest to your group as well.
All right, thank you. I think in the interest of time, we'll just have to move on, and we can, yeah, Chuck's email is there. If people have specific questions for him or are interested, then they can get in touch with him directly. Moving on, we'll have Tyler Blauel give an IPM update from what happened in the Hall of Marsh and our plans for 2022. Tyler, take it away.
Thanks, Kevin. So hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Blauel. I'm the IPM program coordinator here at the Muck station. And as Kevin mentioned, today I'm just going to go over some of what we faced last year in the Hall of Marsh related to integrated pest management. So to start off, in terms of our IPM program, our main objective is to provide growers in the Hall of Marsh with scouting and disease and insect information. So we do disease and insect forecasting using a number of forecasting models. We also have a diagnostic clinic where we identify diseases and insects on different plants and crops, and also identify weeds that we see in our fields. We also try to provide as best we can growers with timely and accurate and convenient access to insect and disease information. And one of the main ways we try to do this is by sending out our IPM reports or agrophone emails twice per week throughout the growing season. And we're always trying to update, improve, and improve the IPM program. So in terms of our IPM reports or our agrophone updates, as you may be more familiar with, in these reports, we include all weather information that we experienced in the past few days since the last report, the insect and disease pressure that we're facing at the time around the marsh. And this is mainly determined using different forecasting models to determine which days have high risk or low risk. And we also provide control recommendations and all the products that are registered and which ones may be more effective for certain insects and diseases. We also outline any new products that become registered. And we like to mention any upcoming events that we're hosting or that we're a part of. And just right off the top here, I also just, I wanted to mention that our IPM program would not be possible without all of our funding partners. And these include the Bradford Co-op, chemical company sponsorship, all of the growers who participate in the IPM program, and the Ontario Agri-Food Innovation Alliance. So just to start off, the way we kind of like to look at the Hall of Marsh and kind of divide up all of our data that we collect, we like to divide the Hall of Marsh into around 5 sections: the north, the east, south, central, and west. So you'll be seeing this map a little bit more later on when we're talking about insect populations that we came across last year. So to start off, 2021, the 2021 summary, we'll just start off with the weather and what we were faced with. So that past year had many challenges, just like every other year, it seems. Some of the main points though, in June, it tended to be a very hot and dry month. So this was a bit of an issue for emerging carrots and onions. There was a little bit of wind erosion going on around that time. And one of the other main events that we faced was quite a bit of rainfall around the end of September. So this caused some isolated flooding in some fields, and it caused some carrots to be drowned out as well in a couple locations. So just looking at the 2021 weather just a little bit more, we have our maximum and minimum temperature here. You can see these high temperatures in June and our lack of rainfall. And then looking at our daily precipitation here, we can see we received almost 100 millimeters of rain on September 21st. So that caused quite a few issues. For our diagnostic lab, we had 84 samples submitted in 2021. And this was good because this was up from 2020. These samples were submitted by scouts, growers throughout the marsh. And of these samples, 70% of them we found to be have diseases, and 30% of them were either insects or abiotic disorders. So these samples that we received, they're important for us determining when we're first finding stemphyllium on plants, on onions in the marsh, and also other diseases like downy mildew, for instance. And these, our diagnostic clinic, these services are available to everyone. So if you're a scout or grower in the marsh and you have something that you're unsure of, feel free to come by this station and drop it off, and we can have a look at it for you. Just to touch on grower participation a little bit over the past few years. Since 2016, we've seen a little bit of a decline in terms of the number of acres and fields that we've been scouting. We're hopefully seeing a little bit of a plateau, if not a increase. So we're looking forward to an increase over the next few years. All right, so let's get into carrots and what we experienced last year. So the main diseases that we found on carrots were cavity spot and forking. We also found quite a bit of crater rot, fusarium root rot, and aster yellows, of course. Sclerotinia white mold, with all the rain and cooler temperatures later in the season, we started finding quite a bit of sclerotinia. And of course, you have your leaf blights that are usually always a concern at the end of the year as well. So this data that's presented here, this is from a 100 carrot sample that we collect from each scouted carrot field. And we collect these samples, we try to collect them just before harvest. So what we basically found was that cavity spot and forking was found to some degree in all of the fields that we sampled. And in some cases, the incidence was quite high as well. We found quite a bit of crater rot and fusarium dry rot in the fields. And one thing that's definitely a little bit different than the last few years is there was quite a bit more aster yellows. And that could definitely be seen looking out across each carrot field throughout the marsh this past year. So the carrot insects that were of most concern were the aster leaf hopper, as I just mentioned, carrot weevil, and carrot rust fly are usually always our three main carrot insects. So just to start off with carrot weevil, for the most part, most of the sections of the marsh or areas of the marsh had fairly low cumulative carrot weevils per trap. Some of the fields surpassed that 1.5 carrot weevil per trap threshold, which warrants a good product spray at the 2 leaf stage. Right here, this additional line we have here, this is our 5 weevils per trap threshold, and if you surpass this threshold, it warrants a second spray at the 4th leaf stage. We did notice though that around the end of May, beginning of June, we really started to see a real increase in the number of carrot weevils that we were finding in the north. So the north ended up having a lot higher of a care weevil population than the other regions of the marsh. But when we look at the last couple of years, 2020 and 2021 highlighted here in green, carrot weevil numbers overall have gone down quite a bit and are pretty similar to what we were seeing about 10 years ago in 2010, 2011. So this decline in cumulative weevil counts, and we'll see later on a little bit of damage, is probably due to the registration and proper application of Rimon and XRL. They seem to be two really good products for controlling carrot weevil. And when we look at overall damage in the different regions, these numbers here are percentages. So overall, quite low percent damage or no damage at all. But we can see that there was a little bit more damage in the north region where we did find higher population. So moving on to carrot rust fly. Carrot rust fly populations fluctuated quite a bit throughout the season. And most fields passed the 0.1 carrot rust fly per trap per day threshold, which usually warrants a spray. The numbers were fairly high at the beginning of the year, and then there were some higher numbers kind of later in the year, and later in the year when populations reach these kind of levels, these are ones that are kind of really of concern and can cause damage to your carrot crop. And when we look at the overall damage again from the carrots at harvest, again, these numbers are percentages. So again, quite low, but the highest was found in the central region. So just to reiterate just kind of one more time here, the overall weevil and rust fly damage that we've seen the last couple of years has been fairly low compared to the past 10 years or so. And you can really see this decline in weevil damage since 2016. And again, it's likely due to the registration and uptake of the use of Rimon and XRL. So just to touch on Aster leafhopper a little bit, Dennis is going to be going over a really good presentation on Aster leafhopper, and he'll be explaining things in some more detail. But what we generally found in the marsh here was that Aster leafhopper populations were quite high throughout June and the first half of July. And most fields often exceeded the 20 Aster leafhopper per trap threshold. So a combination of these higher populations and a higher percentage of Aster leafhoppers that had the Aster yellows virus likely contributed to more Aster yellows being found in carrot fields throughout the marsh. All right, so moving on to onions. Last year, what we mainly found were that stemphillium and pink root again, these were the most common diseases that we found throughout the marsh. We also found a little bit of downy mildew, and conditions were quite conducive for development throughout the year last year. And of course, we have our purple blotch and sometimes your onion smut, although the incidence for onion smut was quite low. So when we graph our results here and take a look, we do find, as I was mentioning, stemphillium and pink root were the most common diseases. They were both found in all fields, all onion fields that we scouted throughout the marsh. And in some cases, their incidence was quite high. Or one field had 100% stemphillium, and actually a number of fields had 100% stemphillium, and some severity ranged between all the fields. Incidence for pink root was also quite high in a number of fields, but sometimes severity for pink root was quite low. You may be getting a little bit of pink root on the roots of a number of onions throughout each field. And we had our purple blotch, of course, or secondary disease, secondary pathogen. Onion smut was fairly common, but as I was mentioning, disease incidence was quite low, which was good. And we had a little bit of downy mildew come up. I'm thinking though that proper application of good effective products kept this number low. I'm thinking that maybe if we didn't do this, this number could be quite a bit higher. So that was good. And when we look at Stemphillium leaf blight development last year, we found that development really started to increase around the end of July and throughout August. And as I mentioned earlier, it ranged between fields in terms of severity. Some fields had really high Stemphillium severity. But tomorrow we're going to be having a presentation on Stemphillium leaf blight and downy mildew management and recommended programs that we would suggest. So that will be a good presentation to tune into. In terms of onion insects, the two usual insects that are of concern are onion megaflies and our thrips. Aster leafhoppers were a slight concern. We did see a little bit of Aster yellows in onions last year as well. Before onion megaflies, we first saw adult flies on May 20th, which was just 4 days after we first predicted them to be emerging. And this is good. It confirms that our degree day models are working effectively. Our onion megafly populations varied throughout the season. We're a little bit higher at the beginning of the season, but in general, we're quite low compared to many years past. Onion thrips, because we had such a warm, such a hot and dry June, we saw onion thrips a little bit earlier than we usually do. We were also applying our insecticides, our couple applications of Movento a little bit earlier than we would have last year compared to some other years. But this helped to try to keep thrips populations down. And for the most part, they tend to be present throughout the growing season, but didn't really get too high, which was good. And just a reminder too, our threshold for thrips is 3 thrips per leaf. All right, just to finish up and touch on celery diseases a little bit. Our main 2 diseases that we found were our blight and celery leaf curl. We also did see a little bit of Aster yellows, as you would expect, and a little bit of pink rot. The one thing with our leaf curl, when you do notice these curled leaves out in the field, the disease can easily spread from plant to plant through physical contact, and especially when it is wet outside after a rain or during a rain. So it's really important to try to avoid that as best as you can. And same thing kind of goes for your blights, your early and late blights of celery. And for celery insects related to Aster yellows, we are concerned with Aster leafhopper. You also had a little bit of carrot weevil, tarnished plant bug, and aphids. But for the most part, these insects were kept in check. So our IPM report and all of our other research and cultivar trial reports are presented in our 2021 Green Book. So our Green Book is available for pickup at the station. I believe some copies are available at the Bradford Co-op, and it's also available online on our website. And in terms of the 2022 IPM program, scouting will be the same price as last year, $60 per acre. We'll continue scouting twice per week throughout May until harvest, and carrots will continue to be harvested throughout September once per week. And all of your reports will be delivered to your report barn as usual. Our IPM report will continue to be sent out twice per week, Mondays and Thursdays. And in these IPM reports, again, they'll include all of our weather and pest management recommendations, and forecasting updates as well. So if you know which fields you'd like scouted this year, feel free to email me or call the station. And there's also more information available on our website if you'd like to check that out. If you do have Twitter, feel free to give us a follow at Muck IPM. Here we like to post information on periods where there may be high risk of diseases and insects, and any other important IPM information. And somewhat new, we're starting our Muck Crops IPM YouTube channel. So right now we have last year's Muck conference up on there. We have Shawn's variety trial up on there. And we're going to be posting this year's Muck conference to our channel as well. And throughout the year, we're going to be creating a few IPM videos that we'll also be uploading to our channel. So I'll send links out along with those, but feel free to check that out as well. So with that, I just want to thank again all the growers who participate in the IPM program, our IPM scouts, and all of our funding partners. So with that, thank you for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tyler. We did have one question that some people think that onions need a bit of pink root to die down at the right time in August. Is this reasonable, or do you think that pink root causes yield losses in onions?
I think that from what I've seen anyways, pink root is quite a common disease seen throughout almost all onion fields, especially near the end of the season. I think that you may have some that may not contribute to any yield losses, but I would think that, and I haven't really seen it. I haven't seen it myself yet, but particularly if the disease does get quite severe, you can expect yield losses due to pink root. So.
Okay, thank you. If there is no other questions, I think we'll move on to our next presentation. So our next presentation is an industry update from Cohort Wholesale, and we have Cassie Russell who will give us an update. You're on. There you go. Take it away, Cassie.
Great. Everyone can hear me okay?
Yeah.
I got my screen shared up there. Excellent. Hi, everyone. Very happy to be here. Thanks for letting me join. This is my first Muck Crop conference, so really happy to be here. My name is Cassie Russell. I am the technical specialist with Cohort Wholesale, and just going to take a few minutes to give you a little update on some of the products we have in our portfolio. Okay, so for those of you who aren't familiar with Cohort yet, we've been around since 2020, so still relatively new, but we are a Canadian distributor of preferred positioned outdoor fruit and vegetable crop protection products. So we just work in the horticulture space, and we work with suppliers and the established distribution and retail channels, so we can serve key markets through there. We also offer in-season technical support to help growers with timely questions, keep everyone up to date with new products, label expansions, all that sort of thing. And then at the bottom here, I just have a list of the current suppliers we work with, including ADAMA, UPL, Marone Bio Innovations, and a few other suppliers there that all have some new things coming through the pipeline in the next few years. So stay tuned for that as well. And then just a quick slide here showing our full portfolio for 2022, which is comprised again of fruit and vegetable crop protection products from those suppliers I listed. So some of these might be familiar to you: Upside, Perma, Ryman, Silencer. So again, just being the technical rep for Cohort, I am here and available to answer any questions related to these products and work alongside of your preferred retailer to make sure everything's being used properly for maximum in-field performance. Okay, so my main focus today is I just wanted to share with you a quick update on a new product that was just registered, I believe a couple months ago. And this is from our supplier partner, ADAMA, and it is a new insecticide called Ziveda. So Zaveda is a new choice in insect control to give you the same trusted results from previous group 3 insecticides, but in a more sustainable and advanced formulation. So Zaveda is a group 3 pyrethroid, which we're probably all familiar with. The active ingredient is lambda cyhalothrin, and it comes in 4.08 liter jugs, and a single jug will get you about 120 acres worth of coverage. The use patterns for Zaveda are exactly the same as Silencer. If you've previously used that chemistry, that's another lambda cy insecticide from Adama as well. So everything from the rates to the labeled pests and crops are all the same. So you might be thinking this doesn't seem like anything too new here. So just wanted to spend a quick minute to explain what makes Zaveda better than your traditional lambda cy insecticides and why you might consider trying this out if over Silencer or other group 3s. So with Adama's access to the largest library of active ingredients, they're always listening and learning and trying to deliver on improvements to those proven actives by doing things such as making improvements to formulations, ensuring upgraded user experience, maintaining environmental stewardship and sustainability, all while maintaining or improving where possible that trusted efficacy and performance of those actives. So what Zaveda offers is a greatly improved and advanced formulation. It uses sustainable plant-based material versus a non-renewable petroleum distillate, which is what the other group 3s use. And this formulation technology also includes a proprietary adjuvant for enhanced coverage, penetration, and knockdown. So this new formulation means lower volatile organic compounds. So this makes the mixture less odorous and improves the experience of the applicator and possibly your neighbors as well. And there's also some safety built in. So it has a higher flash point for safer storage and handling and reduced hazardous statements on the container. And then you get all this with the same trusted performance of a tried and true active ingredient that's rapidly absorbed and fast acting, with really broad use patterns. So as you can see, Zaveda, it's registered on quite a robust range of crops and pests. Just like the Silencer label, it has a really long list there. And again, yeah, it's the same as Silencer in terms of crops and pests. I didn't have room to include all the key pests that it controls, but I thought I'd just highlight a few on the side there. Including tarnished plant bug, leafhoppers, lygus bugs, thrips, swede midge, imported cabbage worm, those things like that. So yeah, just a few use patterns I thought I would put up here in some muck crops. So Zaveda is registered on carrots for carrot rust fly and carrot weevil as well. The standard rate of 83 milliliters per hectare. And then using your local monitoring to help inform those timings for application. And then Zaveda is also registered on bulb vegetables or crop group 3 for onion thrips. Just note that it is quite a bit of a higher rate. And when using it for thrip control, higher water volumes and thorough coverage is really important. And then I've also just thrown into some use patterns for brassicas, as it is registered for control of flea beetles, diamondback moth, imported cabbage worm, bloopers, swede midge, and again, onion thrips at that higher rate. And just note that the PHI and, the REI does change a little bit if you are using that higher rate to control thrips. And then just some other important things to note in terms of max applications, 3 per year, general 24-hour reentry, and just a good thing to note for use of pyrethroids, since it is a sodium channel regulator, that the activity is temperature dependent. So if you are using group 3s, make sure that you target those applications when the temperatures are below 25 degrees Celsius. So just to recap here on Zaveda, this new insecticide, it is a group 3 with a new advanced formulation using sustainable plant-based materials. It has a low volatile organic compound and reduced odor. And this new formulation ultimately improves user experience while still being a trusted and proven active ingredient that's registered on a broad range of crops and pests for fruit and vegetable growers. So with that, that's all I have today. Hopefully I made up a little bit of the time. For those who haven't met me yet, I just wanted to put up my contact here. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions at all. I'm always happy to chat. I'm available by phone or email, and I cover all of Ontario's fruit and vegetable growing regions. So I'm always happy to come out for a visit and meet any of you. So yeah, that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cassie. I don't see any questions. So given that, I think we'll move on to our next presenter is Dennis Van Dyke from OMAFRA. And Dennis is going to give us an update on Aster yellows. And since it was such an issue in 2021, sort of what was going on, and we'll hear from him. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll chat about Aster yellows. Heavy year last year. I don't think we've seen that much pressure since 2014. So it's been a little bit of a while since this has become a big issue. So I thought a refresher might be good. The leaves start to turn yellow at first infection. You know, a lot of things can cause the leaves to turn yellow, but this is a pretty distinct pattern. It'll eventually also start to turn red. You can see here that yellowing quickly turning to red. And then the dark red leaves are what's pretty typical as well of the foliar symptoms. Potassium deficiencies can sometimes show up as red leaves as well, but it's pretty easy to tell the difference because as soon as you see any yellowing or red leaves, if you check near the base of the plant, you're going to see these sprouts. So these, you can see them down here at the base of the plants, those small little sprouts coming out the side of the carrot and a whole bunch coming up from the middle. That is definitely Aster yellows caused by the phytoplasm. Lots of new roots. This is what it looks like as it gets worse and worse. A whole bunch of new small pale shoots. So if you pull that carrot up, you know, you see you got the yellow leaves here turning red. You got a bunch of shoots there. The leaves also, the roots also are putting out a bunch of new roots. So those root bases have a bunch of new roots. They look kind of like a hairy appearance. Looks fairly ugly. You can see here as well, a bunch of those root bases putting out new shoots. Looks fairly ugly. The issue is it looks ugly, but it's not ugly enough sometimes to get picked off the grading line or sometimes goes to the optical sorter. It's still an orange carrot. So sometimes this makes it through the grading process. And the issue is it's kind of a hard, brittle, and very bitter tasting after it's infected with Aster yellows. So not ideal if this ends up in a bag or if this ends up getting processed. What's actually going on in the background is actually caused by this phytoplasm. It's a candidatus phytoplasm asteris. So it's basically, it's almost like a bacteria. Think of it like a bacteria. You can see here, this is sort of slices of a plant. So these are the phloem. This is where all the nutrients are moving in. And you can see all this basically Aster yellows phytoplasm plugging up all the phloem. So it plugs up all that vasculature. And that's what causes a lot of the yellowing and the issues. How does it get around? It gets transferred and injected into the carrots by this guy. This is an Aster leafhopper, very distinct small insect. It's sort of a pale gray, a blue-green, and it has those distinct spots on its head. So you can kind of see these spots, sort of 6 spots. These are all taken on a sticky card. It's very distinct. It's a little bit less lime green than potato leafhopper. Potato leafhopper is very lime green, a little bit smaller. Aster leafhopper is a little larger, has sort of a darker back body, and it's more of a blue-green and those distinct spots. So pretty easy to tell if it's attracted to yellow or orange sticky cards. So if you're trapping for rust fly, you'll also be catching the leafhoppers, which is very handy. I stole this from the Canola Council because they have a lot of money. This is sort of what happens when Aster yellows is in the vicinity. So these leafhoppers will come, they'll start feeding on the carrots or any plant that can carry the phytoplasm, which is actually a wide range of hosts. If they pick it up, they're now infected with it. It takes about 20 days, sometimes, as much of a month, depending on the temperature, where that phytoplasm starts to multiply, and then it really sort of infects the leafhopper here, right? So it starts to pick it up, it builds, and then it starts infecting everything else that it feeds on. So it's going to go around your field just infecting plants as it goes and as it feeds. It takes about 7 to 14 days from this feeding and the carrots for them to start to show symptoms. So once you're seeing the yellow leaves and the red leaves and definitely the sprouts, it's already been, you know, weeks basically after it's been fed on and infected. So you really want to make sure you're monitoring for these adult leafhoppers coming in so you can spray for them before they start infecting your carrots. So once you start seeing symptoms similar to, you know, other pathogens, downy mildew, for example, once you start to see some, it's already in a bunch of others. It just hasn't shown up yet. So where does it come from? We have two main sources here in Ontario that it comes from. One of the local population comes from winter cereals, winter wheat. So the adults will basically lay their eggs in this winter wheat in the fall after it's been planted. So there'll be a bunch of eggs in here. The winter wheat, it'll feed on that wheat. But once it starts to mature and starts to die off and dry down, they'll move to better hosts. So kind of that you know, June and especially into July, they'll leave all the winter wheat that they were overwintered on, and they'll flush into, you know, carrot fields, onion fields, potato fields, whatever is nearby. They have quite a wide host range. So that's one problem. The good thing about this population, the phytoplasm doesn't transfer in the eggs. So unless there's a bunch of adults doing feeding in the fall and there's a bunch of infections here, or if it picks it up early in the season, a lot of times they don't necessarily hatch with the phytoplasm with the ability to cause the Aster yellows problem. One of the other issues we have is there's another population that comes up from the south. So this is actually, these are the prevailing winds. This is from June 15th last year. So June 15th last year, this is what the prevailing winds look like. Basically a straight shot, picking stuff up down here in Mexico and Texas on where there's feeding there and bringing it all down to us. So it is likely, you know, there's anything that's sort of windborne can be carried this way. We see that with diseases. It's the same thing with insects. A lot of times we can see a big flush of insects come in, and sometimes that's insects that are coming from the south that are already infected with the phytoplasm. So a lot of times we see a higher percentage of infected Aster yellows coming with this population. So why was it so bad? Was it because we had really high numbers? Was it just because a lot of the Aster yellows were infected? You know, this is a shot here from August. Like, look at all these red and yellow leaves. Like that is that's very high incidence. Like we're pushing, you know, 5, close to 10% in some spots. That's pretty widespread. So what's actually caused that? You can see here, this is a ECG of a 55-year-old man present. Oh, no, never mind. This is Aster leafhopper counts from the last year and the year before, so 2020 and 2021. This is from trap and sweep net counts. Main thing you can see here is this section. So most of your counts and the catches that we see is from the beginning of June until the end of July. It really drops off in August, and sometimes we see a bit of a peak pop back up in September. But it's really this June, July that you really need to be looking out and worrying about Aster leafhoppers. If I dig down a little deeper, so this is just the trap counts comparing 2020 to 2021. 2020 is in the blue, right? And the 2021 is in the red. This sort of 10 Aster leafhopper count is sort of our first threshold, right? This is sort of like, okay, it's not low anymore, it's medium. This 20 is, okay, it's not medium, it's high. So you can see even in 2021, in 2020, when there was not a lot of Aster yellows around, we still had some high peaks here. You still see it peaking above 20 counts sometimes. In 2021, we saw fairly consistent peaks from June, July, sort of above that 10 Aster leafhoppers per trap threshold. So Not too much of a difference here, not too crazy, nothing really jumping out. If you compare the sweeps, so this is scouts walking through fields with sweep nets, sweeping over the crop, collecting all the Aster leafhoppers and then counting them. So 2020 is the yellow, 2021 is the green. It's really anything above 1 is fairly high. So, you know, for most of July, in terms of sweep net counts in 2021, we're seeing higher populations for sure, but it was, you know, pretty high in 2020 from some of the July sweeps. So again, maybe not the whole picture. When we look at data coming out of Michigan, so in Michigan, what they do is they sweep for Aster leafhoppers, but then they collect the Aster leafhoppers and then they process them in the lab. And they process them to see how many of the leafhoppers actually have the phytoplasm in them. So this is 2019. You can see here from carrot and celery fields, you know, they're collecting 1,200, 1,400 different Aster leafhoppers in all their sweeping. Numbers came back 0.4% infected. So only 5 or 6 that whole year that they found actually had the phytoplasm in there that can cause Aster yellows. 2020, you know, 10 in the carrot fields and 1.4% or 0.2%. We really look for 2% as sort of the threshold of it's high or not. And look at the numbers for 2021. From carrot fields, you know, 9.4% of the Aster leafhoppers trapped had the phytoplasm in there, and 4% basically in the celery fields. So infectivity was off the charts last year. A high proportion and a high percentage of the Aster leafhoppers out there had the Aster yellows phytoplasm in them, which is why we likely saw so much disease out there last year. So this sampling is helpful to sort of track that. Yeah, it's hard to tell because we haven't had issues like this since 2014. So we would assume that the numbers have been fairly low for the most part the last number of years. And as to why the numbers last year were so high, we really don't know. What can growers actually do about it? Tolerant varieties, historically, new varieties were tested for their ability to resist Aster yellows. A lot of the older varieties and heritage varieties will have, you know, a ranking to how tolerant they are of Aster yellows. I haven't seen a lot of that with the new varieties. You know, maybe you can talk to your seed reps to see if they're still sort of testing for that in some of the new varieties, or if they have that information. Scout for them, it's key, right? The IPM program is critical in this, either with traps or sweep nets, both will do. You know, yellow sticky cards that you're looking for rust fly also catch Aster leafhoppers, and it's a really good indication of what your population levels are. Read the IPM updates. We do have a degrading model. I mentioned, you know, the overwintering eggs on that winter wheat. We have a model that basically says when those are going to become adults and start flying around or hopping around. So that's all in the IPM updates. If you check in on that, you can kind of get a sort of a red flag when you expect to see them starting to come. It also has current counts, which is also helpful to know, you know, is it just one area of the field, or is it across the region that we're seeing high counts right now? And then of course, spraying. What can I spray for them? So I thought I would also just problem. There we go. We recently, you may be familiar with our Pub 838 guides in the printed versions. We've recently moved that over to an online database sort of platform. So it just basically launched a couple days ago. So if you go to the link ontario.ca/crop protection, if you're looking for weed management options, scroll down, you can see vegetable crop protection here. Click on that. And basically it'll load, ask you for what crop you're interested in. So I'm looking at carrots. You know, are you looking at seed treatments or in furrow or what? Or you can just skip this section if you don't care. and we have 64 different products registered on carrots currently. You just go to the right, type in leaf hopper, leaf blights, leaf hopper, and basically this is all the products registered on carrots for leaf hopper. So we have 7, of course, old product, group 1A, and then we have a couple other sort of group 4 products, Admire, a Neonic, Closer, and Savanto Prime. And then if you're growing organically, you also have some kale and clay you can spray for some suppression. So that's everything that's registered. Some of these newer products have a little bit more systemic qualities to them. They stick around a little longer. You can also sort of see, if they're registered for control or for suppression. And then if you're really interested in a product, you can drill down to the details, PCP, and then what your re-entry and pre-harvest intervals are. So that's sort of a quick intro into our new system we just launched. It is a sort of a beta version. We would love to hear feedback on what works and what doesn't, what growers like and what they don't. So please feel free to try it out and let us know with any comments or feedback on that. So with that, kind of wraps it up. Any questions on anything? I don't have the chat up.
There's no questions in the chat, Dennis, but thank you. And with that, we'll get back to our program. We have Jody Mott from the Hollow Marsh Growers Association. Jody's going to give an update on what's happening with the Growers Association. Jody.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay, Kevin?
Yep, you're good.
Perfect. I never know how the internet's going to work at the office. I'm just going to give you guys a quick brief overview of what we've been doing. As you know, the past 2 years have been kind of crazy, and we've been facilitating government meetings, whether provincial, federal, or municipal, as much as we can to assist everybody. Our AGM has been postponed, and it actually will take place next Wednesday, April 13th at 7 p.m. at the Old Community Center. So all members are invited to come out and actually see each other, chat, fist bump, whatever you're happy to do. And we're looking forward to hosting everybody in person. We did put it off because we did feel that we would get more out of it if everybody could meet in person. So that'll be next Wednesday at 7 p.m. at the Old Community Center in Bradford. Our office is now functioning again, and I will be in and out 2 to 3 days a week. If anybody needs me, you know how to reach me by phone, but if you have to meet me on site, I am available to meet on site as well. We're also facilitating some food forklift courses. If anybody needs it, please reach out to me. We are keeping a list, and we will be facilitating that as soon as we get enough people to go out and about, and we can fill a course, because we do have some really good instructors that we have found, and I have had requests for it. Also, food safety. I know people don't want to talk about it, but it's there and it's needed. We have been assisting people get on board, get it done. There's some good software out there as well that's really works well for a lot of you. So if you're struggling with it, please don't get frustrated. Please reach out to myself, and we will find you some help, and we will get you through it to get your papers. I don't want to see anybody struggling. I do know that some farmers have been frustrated with the people that are doing their audits, and I have reached out and voiced those concerns. So if you have a concern, please reach out to me, and we'll be pushing those along so everybody knows. And I don't want to see anybody really frustrated with it. We've been working very closely with OMAFRA. They have a HEPA filter program out there right now for anybody who has migrant workers. You were allowed to apply for it, and you were allowed to, I believe, get 1 or 2 per residence. They've changed the conditions a little bit, and so you actually qualify to get more. So go back to the original email of your acceptance if you already got it. Just email them back, and they will get you set up with hopefully 1 or 2 more filters. If you haven't taken advantage of this program, you have to go in, register your farm, register your migrant workers, housing. It's just basically for Ontario able to begin a database so they can actually assist you. This is all information that's already registered with the feds, but they can't share it. We can't share it with them. So this is a way of getting their database and to get everybody forward so that they can reach out to you and work all of us together on who's where and help really largely. So there is that program available for you there as well. And if you have any questions about it, again, reach out to me. Through all this craziness of COVID, the Holland Marsh has been working with OMAFRA. We were fortunate to get funding for a sustainability project. We had 5 pillars. One was water use efficiencies. on the fields and processing plants. Another one was soil health improvements and soil loss. The third was plastic and culls. We looked at what's out there and what we can do with it. Fourth topic was water safe water for the crops. And the fifth one, as you guys heard earlier, the robotic weed control. With the robotic weed controllers, we actually did a demo day, did a few things, brought the robots into the marsh as well as some of the highlands, and we're able to demo some of that. So that worked really, really well. Our whole report will be coming out mid-April. It's just going into now in its final stages, and it will be shared to everyone through our newsletters as well as our website. So we were really, really fortunate to work with McDonald on this for our funding and to get information that everybody needed to be done and what it looked like. So that was a great, there was a lot of good feedback and a lot of good information that we found on there. Everybody's favorite topic, COVID. I know, I'm glad there's a video screen. Nobody shoot me. The screen between is going to protect us. Everybody needs to remember COVID's not gone away. If you need COVID tests, we have a lot of them. We're distributing them to members, non-members. I have all sorts of them. Please reach out. You're still going to need them. Boosters and vaccines. There's anybody else needs a booster or anybody who has their workers coming in that need their first vaccines, we are able to facilitate these as well. They're just a phone call away. So just pick up the phone and we can do that as well. The most important thing when you get your migrant workers in, there's two pieces. There's a federal quarantining process. And then after that, if you get quarantine or COVID on your farm, make sure you know the difference between those two and what you need to do for those. As of Friday, I'm told that we will get a most updated, what you need to know for the federal quarantine versus the provincial isolation process. The big pieces that has changed is if you get COVID on your farm with your migrant workers, you do need to pay somebody, a secondary person, to check on your workers twice a day, one in person, one by phone. That is part of the federal and provincial regulation. So that's a big one there. So keep in mind with that. Everybody know, I'm aware now that April 1st, things have changed. So I'm sure everybody knows that as of April 1st, if you get your workers and they are tested, they still can go to work. The big thing as we're suggesting is cohort them till you get those results back, because if they do have COVID and they've come in contact with other people on your operations, then everybody gets to have a holiday for, depending on the process, if they're Canadians or if they're migrant workers. There's two sets of rules. We're trying to streamline those as much as possible. For those that don't know, Canadian Horticulture Council of Canada has now been changed to Fresh Vegetables and Growers of Canada. They had a name change at their AGM last week. You will be receiving my newsletter tomorrow, and in there, you're going to be requesting to do a survey, and I may screw up the name of this. I always do. It's chlorothalonol. And I know I've said it wrong. They're actually looking for everybody to fill in the survey they need. So this is information to try to get that they need for the vegetables and fruit. So please, and potatoes. So please, please, please fill out those surveys. Every day is a different day. One of the big things that we've worked very hard with Minister Mulroney since she came in power and into being our MPP was to work on the Bradford bypass. We were pleased to help announce that the funding was coming through. And as of this week, they announced that the shovels are going in the ground. So this will make and hopefully take some of the ease of the highway off of us and actually give us another way to get product down once it's completed. So that was a big win for the area. Minister Mulroney also is in and around. She's coming in. If you'd like to speak to her or have a round table with her, please reach out to me. We are facilitating those as well as we go forward. As for now, I know that we're on strict time. I could talk for quite a while, but we just wanted to give you a brief update on some of the things that we're working on. If you guys need anything, as you know, I'm just a phone call away. And through the past 2 years, we're really, really thankful that we've had all the partners that we've had to get everybody through the tools that we need. And we're keeping fingers crossed that you guys have a great growing year. Anybody have any questions?
No questions, just a comment. Josh just commented that, yeah, chlorothalonil is the active ingredient in Bravo and Echo products.
Thank you for that. So it's really important that we get the feedback on it so that they can keep on working on this.
And hopefully Josh will give us an update on what is all involved with that tomorrow as well. So, all right, thank you, Jody. If there's no other questions, we'll move on. We have next an industry update from Bayer Crop Science. So we have Laura Aarts, who's here to give us the update. Thank you, Laura.
Okay, so hopefully you can see that and everyone can hear me. For those, yeah, thanks, Kevin. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Laura Aarts and I work with Bayer Crop Science. And I'm involved with tech support for their hort products. I've also included the contact information for Marika Patton on this slide. Marika is the sales rep that covers your area. And she's actually, unfortunately, at the Lindsay Farm show today, so that's why she's not part of this, but I wanted to still make sure that you had her contact info as well. So what I wanted to do today is just go through a few different updates on products that we have. Most of ours focus on carrots today because that's the crops that we're focusing on, but I also have a little bit on some of the other veggies as well. So the first product that I wanted to talk about is actually Savanto Prime, which Dennis just did a bit of an update on with his Aster leafhoppers and Aster yellows talk. So with Savanto Prime, as Dennis mentioned, it is a group 4 insecticide. So it's not a neonic, which products like Actera and Admire are neonics, but it's in the same resistance management group as those in terms of rotational purposes. So Savanto Prime is what they call a 4D insecticide. It works by both ingestion and contact activity. And a real strength with this is A, it's very fast acting, and B, there is some residual to it as well. The other thing that makes it a bit unique is that it has a really good safety profile for different beneficials that might be in the fields as well. So you can see on the bottom there the picture of the different insects that it has activity on. I just want to point out for any growers that have onions that are in the group, if they see maggot there, it's actually blueberry maggot that it's registered for. We don't have good activity with Savanto on onion maggot, in case anybody sees that and is wondering. But the focus for the crops that we'd be looking at really is for aphids and leafhoppers and Colorado potato beetle if there's potato growers there. So here's a list of the different vegetable crops that we're labeled for, and I bolded the crops that I thought would be more applicable with the growers that we have today. But you can see here for carrots, the great option I can see for Savanto Prime is for leafhopper control. And then for the leafy vegetables and the cole crops, it would be for aphid control. But the residual, I think, is a nice feature of this, and it's not affected by temperature as some other products may be that you might be using for leafhopper control. I also wanted to touch on a fungicide that we have called Luna Sensation. And what Luna Sensation is a combination of two different fungicides we have. So one is Luna, which is our group 7 SDHI fungicide. And the other is a group 11 that we sell separately called Flint, but it's a mixture, equal mixture of those two active ingredients. And again, I've tried to bold the crops and the target pests that I think would be applicable for the growers today. But you can see for root vegetables like carrots, it's registered for controlling Alternaria as well as Sclerotinia or white mold. And same diseases for your brassica leafy vegetables and your cole crops and your leafy greens. You can see here that it's got a really short reentry, so a 12-hour reentry period, which is great. And the pre-harvest interval is pretty attractive too. So for cole crops, it's actually, you can use it up to the day of harvest. And for carrots, it's a 7-day harvest. So one of the other benefits, the Luna portion of Luna Sensation is xylem mobile. So what happens here is that what they did here is applied the product in this square. And you can see that over time, because it's xylem mobile, it's actually flushing out and spreading across the leaf. So it makes it a bit more mobile, and it also has translaminar activity, meaning that it will protect the underside of the leaf that it's sprayed on as well. So just to show you the activity that it can have. So here is activity on Sclerotinia or white mold in carrots. with Luna Sensation in the green compared to the gray bar, which is untreated. So you can see here that, 45% of the carrots that were not treated were showing white mold, versus in the Luna Sensation program where it was only 5%. So it is very effective on white mold. And then looking here, this is actually with cabbage, but it works well on Alternaria in carrots as well. It has great activity. And I think both of the actives that are in here, the group 7 and the group 11, both have excellent activity on Alternaria. So you can see here how low the incidence is where they were using Luna Sensation. So if you haven't tried this before, I would encourage you to try it. We've had great performance with it. And then Clarence actually kind of touched on partner as well, but I thought with lots of talk about Linuron and carrot herbicide programs, I thought I'd put a quick slide on partner, which got registered specifically for muck soils through the minor use system to be used as a pre-emerge in carrots. So the idea behind here is to spray it 3 or 4 days before the crop emerges. I'm sure many of you have used partner in onions before, so you know that it's working on broadleaf weeds, and it's a contact herbicide, not offering residual. But the other thing, which again, I think Clarence did a good job of mentioning it, but just the comment about making sure not to irrigate carrots if you've put on a pre-emerge for partner 2 days following your application or 3 days from the crop emerging, just to make sure that you don't hurt the carrots at all. You can see there's a rate range. We would recommend that higher rate because it does do a better job on if you have some larger weeds there. And then the pre-harvest is 45 days, which shouldn't be an issue given that it's a pre-emerge application for carrots. And then all I wanted to mention here is really that the weeds that we're targeting, I mentioned that it's broadleaf weeds. We're targeting small weeds here. So you can see the 4-leaf stage is listed for something like pigweed. If it gets beyond that, partner can struggle controlling it. So I guess my key message here really is that the weeds are small that we're targeting. There's some like lamb's quarters, you can go up to the 8-leaf, but just to keep that in mind. And then the last thing that I wanted to touch on is a new group 28 insecticide that we've got registered about a year ago. And it's a powerful 2nd generation diamide that uses low rates to control the pests that we are labeled for. What I wanted to show you here is there's 2 different leaf discs. So you can see the one on the left was treated with Viago. The one on the right is untreated. And what they did is they put fall armyworm on the leaves and monitored it over a 14-hour period. And what I want to show you here, how Viago works is primarily by ingestion. So the insect does need to take up some of the product in order for it to start working. But I want to show you 2 things. One is how little feeding actually occurs on here for over this 14-hour period for it to start impacting them. And the other is how fast it starts to affect the larva. So within 1 to 2 hours after they've ingested the product, it starts to create muscle spasms and things like that in the insect, and eventually they get paralyzed and die. So it does happen quite quickly, but they do need to ingest some product for that to happen. Here's the different crops and pests that we have. And again, I've bolded the ones of interest, but for potatoes, it's primarily Colorado potato beetle and flea beetle that we're targeting. And for the cole crops and the leafy vegetables, it goes after the Lepidoptera pests, which would be your imported cabbage worm, diamondback moth, cutworm, armyworm. But it also has activity on flea beetles, which is I think a strength of Viago. It does work really well on flea beetles as well. So one feature that I wanted to show you guys is the residual that Viago has. And I think especially with crops like some of the cole crops with their waxy leaf, you can really see a difference in the residual with this product. And what I wanted to show you is the second pink bar here. So basically in the second bars of each of the treatments, it's where they've sprayed cabbage, waited 12 days, and then introduced the pest on the plant, which in this case was diamondback moth. And you can see even 12 days after that insecticide was applied, they were still getting, almost 100% control with Viego. And I mentioned that it's really strong on flea beetles. A newly emerging pest in Quebec is this red-headed flea beetle that they're finding in lettuce. So they've done quite a bit of work on it there, but just to show you, this was in a multiple spray program, but you can see that Viego, compared to some other group 28s, has very good activity on flea beetles. So the product is rain fast in an hour, not affected by temperature, very excellent residual performance with it. And it's got a short re-entry and a 1-day pre-harvest for, I say most vegetables here, all vegetables have a 1-day pre-harvest with the exception of potatoes, which is 14 days. So if you haven't had an opportunity to try this, hopefully you'll get a chance to try it this year in the field. So with that, I'd like to say thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak today. Marika and I wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of let us know if you tuned in for the presentation today. So I've put Marika's email here. If you email Marika and let her know that you tuned in for the meeting, then she'll send you a pair of work gloves for the spring here. So thanks for your time, and I wish you all the best this growing season.
All right. Thank you very much, Laura.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, everybody get your free pair of gloves.
Yeah.
Moving on, we have Shawn Janse. Shawn will give us the highlights from the carrot cultivar trials from 2021. Take it away, Shawn.
All right, thank you, Kevin. So as Kevin mentioned, I'm going to talk about the highlights from the carrot variety trial that were grown last year in 2021. We seeded the trial on May 19th and 20th. We had 36 varieties from 8 different companies. We actually had a bit of a bump up in variety submission last year, which was nice to see. We harvested the carrots from the 18th to the 28th of October. The evaluations were done from the 6th of December to the 29th of December in that time frame. Just some things that we saw through the variety trial last year. Irrigation was applied to aid in establishment, as Tyler mentioned earlier in our presentations, that it was a bit dry in May and into June. So I did put some irrigation water on to make sure we got good establishment of plants. And the stand counts are actually quite good, and the vigor was quite good on the carrots also. So they really benefited from that little bit of irrigation water that was applied. We had very low weevil damage. I think that also, as Tyler mentioned, thanks to XREL and Ramon used those products, really kept the weevil damage down very low this year. Overall, we had average yields from the trial. We had high incidence of cavity spot, though, at evaluation. It was really high compared to what we have seen over the last few years. There was also some moderate levels of blight at time of harvest in October. It was a bit of a bump up again compared to the last few years, what we've seen. Average lengths and the color was good, although I noticed in some of the varieties slightly some more unevenness within the carrot samples over probably the last 2 or 3 years, where the carrots have all been really having good quality and color. Looking at percent marketable, so in the cello varieties, the trial average was 65.7. It ranged from basically 81 to 54%. In the jumbos, it was 76.1% marketable, ranged from 89.5 to basically 60%. The cellos did have a decrease in percent marketable this year, about 10% compared to last year. And the jumbos increased actually in percent marketable, about 4% compared to last year. So the top 4 varieties in the cellos and the top 4 varieties in the jumbos were 2384 from Stokes at basically 81% of the carrots being marketable. And then the jumbos, the top one was Speedo from Vilmorin at 89.5%. The second best percent marketable carrot in the cellos was Orange Blaze from Seminis at 76%. And in the jumbos was Volcano from Vilmorin at 87.8%. Third one, Jinsko from Norseco at 75.9%. And in the jumbos, Extremo from Vilmorin at 84%. And Narvek from Bejo at 75.8% marketable in the cellos. And in the jumbos, a numbered variety from Pure Line Seeds, a new company adding some things into our trials last year, at numbered variety 480620 at 81.5%. So you can see in there, as I mentioned, sort of that the percent marketables had decreased a bit in the cellos And you can see that the jumbos were slightly better in percent marketable overall when the trial was evaluated. Looking at yield, so I already mentioned that the yield was kind of down, and I think a lot of that more shone through in the cellos than it did in the jumbos, but just the same. So in the cellos, the trial average was only 989. It ranged from 675 to 1475 bushels per acre. And it was about a decrease of 200 bushels per acre compared to last year. In the jumbos, the trial average was 1231. Not surprising, we're going to see more yield in jumbo carrots than we are probably in cellos. It ranged from 785 to, well, that should be 1505. And it decreased by about 40 bushels per acre compared to last year. So you can definitely see that the cellos had a more significant decrease in bushels in yield compared to last year than the jumbos did. And the top 4 varieties for the cellos and top 4 varieties for the jumbos as far as yield goes was Nevada from Bejo at 1475 in the cellos. And the one thing I'd like to point out very quickly is that if you see a number behind any of the names from here on in, that just gives you an indication that it is, this one here, for example, is the 3rd year that it has been in the top 4 varieties for yield. And same with Berlin in the jumbo type. It's been 2 years now that it's been in the top 4, and it came in at 1550. The next highest yielding one in the carrots was 2384 from Stokes at 1310. And then Bastia from Bejo at 1426. 3rd highest, Narvik from Bejo at 1306. And in the jumbo type, Bravo from Bejo at 1420. And finally, Naval from Bejo at 1208 bushels per acre. And in the jumbo type, Nevada at 1376. So those are the varieties that had the best yield when it was done, when evaluation was completed. I'm looking at oversized. So anything we consider oversized is anything over 1 3/4 inches in diameter up around the crown area of the neck. And as far as the cellos, Carnival from Illinois Seed Company had about basically 33% of the carrots being oversized. Orange Blaze from Seminus at 32, Cell Bunch at 27.2, and the trial average in the cellos was 18.5. And of course, some of those varieties listed there can be considered a cello/jumbo type mixed carrot. And in the jumbos, we expect to see much higher percentages, in which we have here, but the top ones were Extremo from Vilmoran at 72.3, Berlin at 68.6%, Bravia at 66.1, and the trial average for the jumbos was 54.8. The jumbos were fairly comparable to 2020, but the cellos actually had actually decreased in the percentage of oversized. Moving on to scores or the quality of the carrots. So this year at Grower Field Day, the carrots were coming along quite nice, and I was very pleased. But as Tyler mentioned, we had a fairly significant water issue towards the end of September. And that certainly did have an effect on carrot quality by the time we got into harvesting them in October, almost about a month after the event had occurred. But when we're looking at scores or quality, we're basing it on such things as uniformity of shape, length and width, appearance, internal, external color, blight, resistance to green. The trial average was 6.82, which is considered average. It ranged from 5.76, a little on the poor side, to 7.57. Above average or good. The quality was slightly better in the jumbos than what we saw in the cellos. The cellos seemed to be more affected by that severe water event than the jumbos did. But the 6 cultivars that had the highest score in the trial, as far as the cello types go, was Naval from Bejo at 7.1, and in the jumbo types was a numbered variety from Pureline, 480619 at 7.38. Are all both of those be considered quite good at the first one for the cellos and good for this jumbo type. Carnival from Illinois Seeds at 4.8, Extremo at 7.32. Cell types Narvik from Bejo at 7.45, and in the jumbo type Speedo at 7.24. Cavity spot. So I think the carrots were probably doing pretty good until we had that fairly wet, significant event in towards the end of September. And after that, I think things really headed south on us. The trial average was 83% of the carrots had cavity spot on them with a light to medium-sized lesion. It ranged from one variety only having 32% of the carrots with a light lesion, which would be 1 to 2 millimeters, just kind of more or less specky, up to one variety having 97% of the carrots having cavity spot with a medium-sized lesion. It was a 38%, almost a 40% increase in cavity spot compared to the last year. There was also, when we did the evaluation, more individual cavity spots on the roots than what I have seen in the past. So generally, when I take a look at a carrot, I'm looking primarily if it has cavity spot, B, the biggest lesion on the carrot, and then C, the number of lesions on the carrot. And a lot of the times, especially like say last year, for example, we would have seen 1, 2, or 3 cavity spots maybe on a carrot. This year it was more like 5, 6, or 10 plus on the carrots. But the cultivars that had the lowest amount of cavity spot that was found at evaluation was Volcano, was the best one at 32% of the carrots having a light lesion. Brilliance from Stokes at 38 with a light lesion. Carval from Illinois at 63. Narval at 73, and Narvik at 75. Now, the Carval, Narval, and Narvik all being sort of 60 to 75, but still the lesion was quite small. It was see if I can quickly find something here. It was a barely noticeable or just a very lightly indented into the carrot root system, into the carrot skin. So very, very manageable, still 100% marketable type of carrots. But the trial average again was 83 light medium-sized lesions. So cavity spots certainly was an issue on the 2021 carrots. Moving on to weevil and rust damage. I always look and see what's been kind of happening out there in the field. Sort of as Tyler was mentioning, sort of from like 2016, a little bit beforehand, we were really struggling with some weevil damage. After the introduction of Extral and Ramon, weevil damage completely has disappeared. And this year too, looking at weevil in the black bars and rust fly in the gray, pretty much non-detectable. The trial average for weevil damage was less than 1% at 0.15. And as far as rust fly damage goes, was at 2.75%. So very low levels of insect damage found within the variety trial. On the adaptation side, we had 2 varieties that were sent in. So in the mains, we're growing the carrots. They're more or less commercial available varieties. We do 3 replicates. We harvest a yield sample. We also harvest a storage sample. In the adaptation, it's carrots that are up and coming, have possibility. A lot of times seed reps will put them into the adaptation just to see how they perform on muck soils or how they perform in the hollow marsh. And this year we had 2 varieties, both of them from Illinois Seed Company. And as far as percent marketable goes, they were numbered varieties, 2011 and 2008. The marketable lists of them were 83.8 and 78.1. Both of them were, I would describe, more of a jumbo type carrot. As you can kind of see here in the yield picture. The yield was fairly high on both of them at 1688 and 1474. Has to be done as a comparison. It's not necessarily what you would see out in the field, large field scale production. And then on score, both of them scored quite well. Again, most of the jumbos had fairly good score levels this year at 7.71 are considered quite good and 7.43 considering quite good also. Then we also have the storage trial. So in the storage trial, those are actually the 2020 carrots that went in at the end of October of 2020. And we did the evaluation in June, July-ish of 2021. So that year of 2020 carrots, we had 25 varieties that went into storage from 5 different companies, and we stored them for about 38 weeks. Some trial highlights: the percent marketable ranged anywhere from 97.9 to 72.8. So it was quite decent actually coming out. The weight loss ranged from 7.8 to 16.6. The decay ranged from 1.8 to 27.3. They stored good, and I would also say there was a lot decrease in decay found this past year out of the storage trial. However, sprouting was a concern. There was a fair bit of sprouting that did occur. For the top carrots, as far as percent marketable goes, Volcano was the best one at 97.6, 97.9% of the carrots coming out of there still in a marketable state. Istanbul from Bejo at 97. Newhall in the cello seeding rate from Bejo at 96.8. Belgrado from Bejo at 95.7. And Berlin from Bejo at 95.7. And the last one, Cello Bunch from Stokes at 94.6. So those are the carrots that stored the best from the 2020 season. Looking at weight loss, as we saw, the trial average was 11.4. But the ones that had the least amount of weight loss was Naval from Bejo at 7.8, and that's the second year it's been in the top category for that. Istanbul at about 9% weight loss. Nevado from Bejo at 9.5, and the second year that it's been in the top 5. Envy from Stokes at 9.6. Blaine's from Bejo at about 10%. So these are the ones that had the least amount of weight loss after going into storage and then being removed from storage. Decay. The trial average of decay was 8.6. It was actually a decrease of almost 7% compared to the 2019 carrots that were stored. But the ones that had the least amount of decay, Volcano from Vilmorin at only 1.8% decay, Istanbul at 2.6, Newhall and the cello seeding rate at 2.6, Belgrado at 4% basically, and Berlin at just shy of 5%, 4.9%. Now, of course, I've just sped through a lot of the data and given things, but as Tyler has mentioned, we do have all of our reports for the variety trials in the Green Book. It is available here at the station. So if you want a copy, you're more than welcome to stop by and pick up a copy. I believe the IPM Scouts will be delivering copies again this year to all the people on the IPM program at some point in time early this spring. And also, it is also on our website. So, and back data from all the previous Green Books is on there also. So please make sure you take some time and check that out and go deeper into the variety trial results. As I mentioned, 35 varieties, there's lots of carrots there to look at and do some in-depth look at qualities and yields and other things along those lines. Just also some resources that are available from the Muck Station. Tyler mentioned a few of these already, but we do have our web page, which of course it has all of our publications, our Green Books and other information. IPM information's on there, and some other anything else that may be of interest to muck growers. We have our Twitter account, and then this past year they started up a YouTube channel. So Tyler mentioned too that we have the variety trial information's on there. Last year's conference is on there. This year's conference will eventually go on there, and then there's some more work going to be done in the future on that. So please take some time and take a look at those resources of information for you. And just quickly, I just want to say thank you to Mishko and our summer student Madalena, who helped out through the weeding, the harvesting, the seeding, everything to do with the variety trial this year. Their help was very much appreciated, and I couldn't do it without them. And that's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Shawn. I don't see any questions. Anybody have any questions for Shawn? Like you said, all the information is available in the Green Book as well. And if there aren't any, then I will finish off the last presentation of the day. All right, let's escape out of that. All right, my presentation will be a brief update on our carrot research that was done in 2021 at the research station. So we have two projects that we're looking at. First is our sort of ongoing screening of our carrots for resistance to cavity spot. And then we've had a couple trials looking at carrot pythium, looking at carrot forking, and cavity spot, looking at some different treatment options for those diseases. So we talked about cavity spot, Shawn mentioned it. So what promotes cavity spot? We have several susceptible cultivars. We've been looking at red carrots. If anybody's grown red carrots, they're very susceptible, probably the most susceptible carrots that are grown. So we use that as a check. And purple carrots are the opposite. They seem to be mostly resistant to cavity spot. And as many of you know from what Shawn just mentioned, orange carrots have a huge variability in their susceptibility to cavity spot. Soil moisture plays a very big role in cavity spot development. The organisms that cause cavity spot are water molds. So anything that increases soil moisture increases your risk of disease. So if you have poor drainage or heavy rains, and heavy rains, especially for cavity spot, anytime sort of from August on is when cavity spot can develop. And then also if you have cool temperatures in the fall with reduced soil temperatures, that can also help and speed up the development of cavity spot. So higher soil temperatures actually reduce cavity spot incidence. So our objectives in the cavity spot trial are to screen for screen carrot varieties or cultivar, I wouldn't say they're cultivars, but lines from the USDA breeding program from Phil Simon, and look at their resistance to cavity spot. So he's developed different lines over the years that have that do have some inherent resistance now to cavity spot, and we want to compare these to our susceptible atomic red. We're looking at different cello carrots, Cell Bunch, Maverick, Envy, Nairobi, and then also some cut and peel carrots. This has been funded by California carrot growers, so they're more interested in cut and peel types. So we've looked at varieties like Triton, Pro Peel, and Imperial cuts. And the goal of the program is to contribute to the USDA program to improve the genetic stock for carrots, and also to assess is there differences among these cultivars in leaf blight, in their susceptibility to forking, and also to bolting. And once they're developed, these carrots can then be moved on to commercial companies that can then introduce those resistant parent material into their breeding stock. So what causes cavity spot? Well, there's a whole variety of different Pythium species. In California, there's 4 or 5 that have been identified over the years. Pythium sulcatum is one of the most common that's found. And our work that we've done, our grad student Umbrin has done isolations, and we have the same Pythium sulcatum. There's also been historically Pythium violae, and also some other different Pythium species that do cause cavity spot. But our most prevalent species is sulcatum. So just quickly, our methods. So we're looking at 65 different lines, including our cultivars. We direct seed them onto raised beds, sort of usually in early June. We have a 6-meter length, and we don't apply any fungicides to the trial. And then we grow them sort of as we would normal carrots with herbicides and insecticides. We do stop spraying fungicides so we can have that leaf blight develop later on. So as I mentioned earlier, we do look at several leaf blight diseases. So we look at both Cercospora and Alternaria together and determine the sort of differences in susceptibility among the cultivars. And then we've also looked at forking, which is another cause, is also caused by Pythium, but it can also be caused by other factors, especially carrots that aren't suited to growing on these high organic soils. You can get forking, or you just get misshapen roots based on growing in high organic soils. So then our carrots are harvested. We look at 50 carrots from each rep of each treatment, and we harvest them in late October, and then look at them usually in early December, late November. And then we take a separate sample that we look at harvest, where we assess the amount of forking that is found in the carrots. For our assessments, each of the carrots are washed and assessed for cavity spot incidence, as Shawn mentioned, based on the length of the largest lesion on the carrot. So we're looking at a 1 is less than 1 millimeter, 2 is 1 to 2, all the way up to a 5 is over 10 millimeters in length. And then we use that number to calculate the disease severity. And as I mentioned, we also look at leaf blight and bolting in the field. And our leaf blight assessment ranges from 0 being pretty much clean to 5, where the foliage is mostly dead. Some notes on our trial. Because these are mostly breeding stock, we've had problems with stand, but we seem to have overcome that and had relatively good stands in 2021. Our cavity spot was relatively high. We had some 91% incidence and some 70% severity. It was looking dry, so we wanted to make sure we had some disease, so we added a good inch of rain probably in early August. In late September, as Shawn and both Tyler mentioned, we had like 9 inches of rain, so we didn't need any more water. Ours was in a spot where we did have some flooding at the station towards the front, but our trial was farther back, that we didn't lose any carrots to the high water table that we had. And our leaf blight was moderate to high, and we had very varying amounts of forking from sort of 1 to 15%. And this was taken in 2021 or in 2020. In 2021, we had very little bolting in our trial. Looking at the severity among some of the lines, so there have been some developments. This F7738B, doesn't really matter what the number is. But all these ones here, the 47, 45, and 43, they're all related. So they all have those same parents in there. So we seem to have hit on sort of some parent groups that have resistance. So you see deep purple or purple, we had no cavity spot. So this is basically under 10%. Those are the crosses. And then we also have this NBH, which is another parent line that has had good resistance in other years. So again, in 2021, this showed the same. And then you can see some of the cultivars that we had and where they rank in terms of severity compared to our atomic red, which we had 70% severity in there. And we had propeel twice, so we did have a little bit of difference, sort of maybe 5% or so between the different cultivars of propeel. Looking at 2018, 2020, and 2021, this is again a severity. We didn't include 2019, but these same cultivars, we had all 3 years, or we had, these were combinations of the same line. So we had relatively low disease in all the years, which is good to see. And you can see some of these other cultivars are still relatively resistant in our trials. So again, looking at atomic red, you can see here we have very large lesions on the right, and this is the amount of damage. We only have, out of the 50 carrots, we have 6 healthy carrots. Deep purple, this is the exact opposite. We have all healthy carrots. Some people also ask, well, can you see the cavity spot? Well, when you look at, thousands of carrots, I think we get a pretty good idea of whether a mark is a cavity spot or it's just a mark. So we're pretty confident that there aren't any cavity spots on this. Again, looking at the F77-338, we have 7 carrots. Again, these are in the very light, so these would still be marketable. They're just a spot. So even though we have maybe 15% incidence, our severity is relatively low, and these would still be mostly marketable carrots. Again, just looking at some of our crosses with the same line. So we have 15 to sort of 22. And then severity, we have only 6 to 7. And again, very little forking. And leaf blight, like I said, was relatively, there was some leaf blight, but not too severe. And then if you compare that to atomic red, we had 90% cavity spot, going to deep purple down to 0. So we did have a very big range between the different varieties. So in summary of our cavity spot trial, we did have moderate to high disease pressure, higher than in 2020, which isn't explainable, or which we weren't surprised since it was so wet, sort of later on in September and October. So we have found several orange lines that have low cavity spot. Our main species is sulcatum, and that's good that it's also the same species that's found in California, that this is relatable, even though this is on Muck and California isn't, that it's the same disease, or that it's the same subspecies, that the data should be relatable. And also to mention, they've done this trial also in Washington State, in California, and our data, I didn't show any of that, but we had very consistent results on the lines that were low, were the lines that were low in both, in all the different sites. We looked at the resistance. I didn't show the data up to cavity spots, and it's related to forking. Sometimes it's all over the place. Some lines have low levels of both, which is good, but that's more of an unknown at this point, we still think. So, and all this information will contribute to Phil Simon in the USDA breeding program for resistance. So I guess the take home is we are making progress. This is a very slow process. This is probably year 10 or 12 or 15 maybe of some of the work we've been doing. But if you talk to people that breed carrots, it is a long process to try find resistance to cavity spot. So moving on, I'll look at some Pythium drench. So again, we're looking at forking and cavity spot. We looked at seed treatments of a new product called Viantis, and then we also looked at drench treatments following seeding, so over the row, and then we applied sort of a quarter to 3/8 of an inch of irrigation. So we looked at registered products, Torrent, Presidio, which are registered for Pythium control at seeding. We looked at a new product, Picarbuchinox, which is the same active as Viantis, and then we looked at a biological product called Bryzo Vital. And then we also looked at, these are liquid products, and then we looked at granular Ridamil at seeding. And then we assessed stand, forking, and yield, and we did mid-season and harvest cavity spot ratings. So here's the data from our drench application trial, looking at the percent disease at harvest. We did have a little bit of reduction in cavity spots. We had about 15%. This was the cultivar Envy, which in our cavity spot trial that we had sort of 50 to 60% disease. Here we still had sort of relatively low 15 to 35 in the untreated. So we did have a reduction. However, the difference between the different treatments isn't significant. So a good trend, but not really significant in terms of the percent cavity spot that we found. And the Picarbuchinox and Viantis, so they are the same product. So one applied as a seed treatment and one applied as an over the row drench. They did relatively the same level of control. So and then the in-furrow treatments, if you're familiar, so we have lines hooked up, and then we have it's a blue flood jet, or not a flood jet, it's a stream jet nozzle. So each of the 3 lines of carrots, everything gets a little bit of product applied right over the row prior to seeding. So again, we looked at the Picarbuchinox, we looked at liquid Ridamil, and also Root Shield, which is a Trichoderma species, another biological. And then we also applied, I don't have a photo, but we applied high cal limestone as a broadcast at 5 tons a hectare. We applied that prior to seeding, then we incorporated that into the hill at seeding. So looking at our in-furrow application, so here's cavity spot again. So we had a little bit higher disease. We had up to 40% in the untreated check. So we did get a little bit of significance between our high calcium rate applied granular, as well as the Ridamil and Picarbuchinox. So we did have a little bit of success, still 25%. So it's not really reducing the incidence of cavity spot. And there was the severity was still relatively low in all these cultivars, and this was Envy as well again, so a relatively susceptible carrot. So our results from these, no difference in the incidence and severity from our drench applications. Most of the registered products don't seem to be very effective. We still get a relatively high amount of cavity spot, even on a low cavity spot year where they were. The application of granular calcium did seem to reduce cavity spot incidence and severity, and also the 2 products also reduced cavitial spot. Okay, good spelling mistake. Our future plans, so we're going to look at the granular calcium a little bit more. We're going to look at a few of the in-furrow treatments that possibly look promise. We're also maybe going to look at some foliar calcium applications and see if we can really, if we can increase the calcium to the plant. There has been work that shows that calcium helps reduce cavity spot. So we will look at some of these in 2022 as well. And as other people have mentioned, this is a quick summary. All our research is summarized in our green book and available at the website as well. And I think that's all I have. So I'd like to acknowledge our funding that was provided by the California Fresh Carrot Advisory Board, and also additional funding from the Ontario Agri-Food Innovation Alliance. And I'd also like to thank Laura and Jeff for their technical assistance. Laura's been with us for a long time. Laura retired in the fall of 2021, and appreciate all the work that she provided sort of over the past 14 years. And Jeff, we hired last summer to replace Laura, and he'll continue to work with us this summer as well. So if there's any questions, I'll take some questions. And if not, then I'll stop sharing. But I'd like to say that that sort of concludes our meeting for today. As people have mentioned, we will have this on YouTube once we get it sort of put together. We'll put it up on our YouTube channel. It'll be available for later viewing. So I'd like to thank everyone for sticking around today, and invite everyone to come back tomorrow, 12:30. We'll have our onion discussion, and we'll go from there. Thank you.